Inside a dungeon, a team of crystal moss collectors are making their way through residual magic power trying to find crystal moss. It was getting closer to the end of their workday, and Kang Hyunwoo, the protagonist of this manhwa, has yet to meet his quota. While making his way through the residual magic power, he noticed a piece of crystal moss that was big enough to fill his daily quota. He starts climbing up the wall to collect the crystal moss, however he slipped and fell into the residual magic water. Yumin, a college research assistant, quickly rushed to Hyunwoo, asking him if he was fine. Hyunwoo took a moment checking his suit to see if any of the contaminated water made contact with his skin. He told her that he was fine, but Min was still concerned and she asked him not to push himself too much. The other workers agreed with Min and reminded Hyunwoo that the water had been contaminated by mana from the crystal moss, and for normal people like them one mistake could mean death, so he shouldn't be trying to push himself. After their workday, Hyunwoo was reminded of how unfair life was. Because he couldn't fill his daily quota, his pay was only $30. We then learned that 30 years ago, when dungeons started to appear, regular citizens started awakening the power to challenge these dungeons. However, Hyunwoo hadn't been so lucky. He was a zero-star powerless person with no chance of awakening an ability. While thinking of how he was going to get through the day with $30, Robert Lee, a lawyer, entered the changing room to deliver what his father left behind for him. Hyunwoo was confused. He never met his parents. He was a bottom feeder with no chance at life. The lawyer handed him a necklace saying he was told to give the necklace to him. Hyunwoo stored the necklace away and quickly finished changing. Later at a bus stop, he showed Min the necklace, and she told him that the necklace was a return stone, an item hunters used to escape dungeons. She had heard a rumor that a return stone could only be used inside a dungeon, so she wondered why his dead father left him a return stone when Hyunwoo was a zero star. Those words cut Hyunwoo deep and she quickly tried to apologize, but the damage was already done. Trying to shift the conversation, she asked him if he heard about Lee Jae-tae. At that moment, the bus arrives. Hyunwoo told her that he didn't care about Lee, and he boarded the bus. Later at his house, Hyunwoo watched a broadcast that covered Lee Jae-tae and his guild clearing a 5-star dungeon, and in the entire world, Lee and his guild are the third guild to clear a 5-star dungeon. Hyunwoo compared his life to Lee. Lee was rich, strong, popular, and no gay shit good looking. On the other hand, all he had was a return stone his father left behind for him. He wasn't complaining about his situation in life. He just wished he had a chance like Lee so he could make use of it. He made a fist, squeezing the return stone in his hand and activating it. Suddenly, he was teleported to a strange place and flooded with different prompts that were making no sense to him. One of the prompts that read "You are the final survivor" stood out to him, and he questioned what it could mean. He started calling out to see if anyone was out there, but nothing. He continued calling out, and he noticed a giant vein of crystal moss. The one he failed to collect earlier would have been worth a few $100s, but this vein should be worth a few thousand, maybe even tens of thousands. Suddenly, he was hit with a poison status, and he was paralyzed. He couldn't breathe and his stamina was being drained continuously. The system informed him that he was being attacked by an enemy, but when he looked around, there was nothing near him. In the end, he died to the most dangerous enemy, Fine Dust. He was revived and was prompted with a quest, First Night in Hell, and the objective was to survive till the morning. He quickly grabbed his jacket and ran off. He didn't know if someone was putting him through this, but if he finds them, then he will be sure to have his revenge. After running around aimlessly for 5 minutes, Hyunwoo died. On his 8th death, Hyunwoo came up with his first plan, which was to pray and ask God for forgiveness, but after 11 minutes he died. On his 11th death, his poison and paralysis resistance increased, and he came up with his second plan, breathing in all of the fine dust that was killing him. As you probably guessed, the plan didn't work and he died. On his 14th run, his resistance increased again, and he realized that he survived the longest when he was just breathing instead of panicking. He started using a breathing technique he learned when he was a kid. He died, but this time he survived longer and even leveled up. He continued with the breathing technique, and on his 28th death, his body felt light. And due to the fact that the poison in his body had reached a critical point, he learned the rare skill Poison Blood, and would no longer suffer damage from poison. However, Hyunwoo couldn't believe it, and turned his attention to the crystal moss instead. There was crystal moss everywhere. Hyunwoo picked one up wishing they were real so he could sell it. Suddenly, the system asked him if he wanted to store the crystal moss. He wasn't sure what was going to happen, but he replied yes, and the crystal moss disappeared. He quickly checked his inventory and learned that the crystal moss was real. Even though he was in hell, the fact that he was unlocking cool abilities made him happy, but all this while he was hearing a sound that's been bothering him. He turned around to look for the source and noticed a horde of mosquitoes making their way to his location. He tried running away, but the horde quickly caught up to him and started drinking his blood. He died, but because the mosquitoes drank his poisoned blood, they also died. After reviving, he leveled up, and because his poisoned blood killed over 100 mosquitoes at once, he obtained a normal achievement, and the power of his poisoned blood increased. However, he also contracted an abnormal disease from the mosquitoes and began slowly losing health. He stood up protesting against the system, but because of the disease he stumbled and crashed into a chair. He learned the dismantling skill, but he didn't notice. His health dropped below 10%, and he started regenerating with his last man standing title. He stood up looking at the notifications he received, finally realizing that he got the dismantling skill by breaking one of the chair leg. He picked up the chair and activated the dismantling skill, splitting the chair into different parts. He organized the different parts on the ground, and he tried to create something to see if he could get another skill. It worked, and he got the normal skill creation. He didn't know how long he was going to be stuck in hell for, or what scary monsters he might come across. But he knew that if he wants to live, he needs to make a shelter. He starts looking around for things he could use. He found more crystal moss and stored it. He continued looking and found a newspaper. He picked it up and tried reading the headline, but he was struggling. Suddenly, he obtained another skill, and with the language skill, he could read the newspaper, and it was an article covering Lee. The newspaper further confirmed that this hell he was in was somehow connected to the real world. But even if the two worlds were connected, there was nothing he could do about it. So first he wanted to see what he could do with the mosquito corpses. After dismantling all the mosquito corpses, he was exhausted. He obtained hell mosquito stingers, hell mosquito wings, and hell mosquito blood. Next, he used the creation skill and created a hell dart. It was a rare item, and the fact that he kept getting rare things concerned him. He created more hell darts and used his creation skill on the rest of the materials he had. The legendary class item Unknown Egg was created, and his creation abilities increased greatly. There is a 50% chance that the egg would be alive or dead, and he could keep it alive by meeting certain requirements. He held the egg close to his chest, trying to give it warmth, but stopped after getting embarrassed. Suddenly, he heard the sounds of something breaking the door down. He hid, and a goblin made its way through the door. The goblin noticed Humu hiding in the corner and lunged at him. Humu dodged the attack and started heading up the stairs. The goblin chased after him. He pulled out the club he made with the creation skill from his inventory and attacked the goblin. The goblin dodged and launched a series of counterattacks, breaking Humu's makeshift club in the process. The goblin smiled and started speaking in its native tongue. Humu was taken aback. He didn't know what the monster was saying, but it was definitely speaking. The goblin saw that Humu was distracted and struck him with his sword down his chest. At that moment, Humu took some hell darts out of his inventory and threw them at the goblin. One of the darts landed on the goblin's hand, and it became poisoned. Without hesitation, the goblin lifted his sword and cut his own arm off. Humu became distracted again, and he concluded that the reason the dart poisoned the goblin's arm was because of his poisoned blood skill. When he focused on the battle, the goblin was gone. He realized that the goblin had jumped in the air and moved to his blind spot. But it was too late. The goblin managed to strike him down. The goblin started walking away, surprised that there were still humans left. And as the goblin walked off, Humu could be seen smiling, almost like he enjoyed getting struck down. His health fell below 10%, and he started regenerating due to the perks of the Last Man Standing title. The title saved him, and he was able to complete the first night in Hell Quest. He was rewarded with 1 silver box, and as compensation for the difficulty of the mission, the silver box became a golden box. He could also use the return stone now, and he had 14 days till he was assigned a new quest. Humu quickly reached into his shirt, grabbing the return stone tightly, and when he opened his eyes, he was in the real world. He started celebrating and shouted, "I'm back! I made it back alive!" Suddenly, he ripped the return stone from his neck, damning his father for giving it to him. He was about to crush the return stone on the ground. However, he recalled all the abilities and materials he was able to gain in Hell and stopped, realizing that the return stone is his only way to move up as a bottom feeder. Min, who was walking by, noticed him, but she wasn't sure if it was Humu, and she called out to him. He turned around, and after seeing that it was Humu, she quickly rushed to him and gave him her raincoat. She took him to her house and gave him a monocontamination remover, just in case Humu was contaminated. Humu told her that he was fine, but she shouted at him for taking monocontamination lightly since it could mean his death. Humu took the monocontamination remover and went into the shower. After using the monocontamination remover, Humu stepped out of the shower and asked Min what day it was, and she told him that it was the 11th of September. And as he tried to make sense of what had happened to him, Min admired his body. She snapped out of it, telling herself to get a grip. Then she told Humu that she was going out to buy him new clothes. Humu wanted to use his old clothes, but she refused since they were contaminated and torn. After she left, Humu opened his inventory to check on his reward for completing the quest. He opened the golden chest, and the quality of the reward was increased due to the effect of his title SSS rank Good Luck, and he obtained the legendary skill card Battle Helper. Hyunwoo held the skill card in disbelief. It's usually very difficult to get a skill, and even a rare skill could get you special treatment. He was sure that in the entire world only 7 people had a legendary skill, meaning he had become the 8th. However, there wasn't a single explanation of what the skill does, so he started throwing punches hoping the skill would activate, then returned from the store catching Hyunwoo punching the air, embarrassing him. She handed him the clothes she bought, and after he changed into them, she brought up the fact that he was fine after being exposed to mana, and she asked him if he had any powers. Hyunwoo told her that he recently awakened his powers so he didn't have full control over them. He recalled that Min was researching something, and he asked her if it was crystal moss she was researching. She told him that it was, and he pulled out crystal moss from his inventory and showed it to Min. Min grabbed his hand in disbelief. "Where on earth did you get this?" she asked. Hyunwoo asked her if where he got it was important, and she told him that the crystal moss was very pure, and the energy level is close to 5 stars, and getting more would be valuable for her research. Hyunwoo told her that he didn't have any plans of giving her the crystal moss unless she helped him find a way to sell it. However, selling crystal moss of that size and purity would be difficult without documentation proving you are a hunter. Since the size of the crystal moss was a problem, Hyunwoo broke the moss in 2. She started hitting and cursing him. Hyunwoo told her that he had more crystal moss and asked if she could sell the one he just broke. She told him that she could, and he gave her 2 conditions. 1, she couldn't tell anyone where the crystal moss came from, and 2, no one can know he was the one selling it. Min got angry at the fact that those were his only conditions when he just wasted a crystal moss of that purity. He apologized and grabbed his torn clothes getting ready to leave, but Min asked him to sleep over. The next morning Min had a glow to her, but Hyunwoo looked drained. She told him that she was leaving to meet up with the buyer and left. 1 week later, Hyunwoo tagged along with Min to meet the buyer, although he was the one who asked her to sell the crystal moss. There are a lot of guys who are on the verge of losing everything, and those kinds of people are saying they will buy the rest of the crystal moss at a premium price. Something was definitely off. When they entered the cafe they agreed upon, Hyunwoo noticed a big ominous fella, making him glad he tagged along. But to his surprise, Min grabbed his hand and brought him to an old man wearing a trench coat. The old man introduced himself as Park Hwizo, and from his grip strength alone Hyunwoo could tell he was strong, and if he attacked then the chances of him winning was low. Min pulled out a bag of crystal moss for Park to inspect. After inspecting them, he asked Min if he needed to deposit the money in the same account. She told him that the account has not changed, and Park grabbed the bag and wished them a goodbye, calling Hyunwoo by his full name. Hyunwoo was shocked, and he questioned if the old man figured out he was behind the crystal moss. Min started teasing him for thinking an old man was going to attack them. She got a notification on her phone and showed it to Hyunwoo, asking him how it feels to make $1 million. Inside a car, Park reports that his deal was successful and that they obtained all of the crystal moss on the market. His boss asked him what he thought about the person behind the crystal moss, and Park shared that he thinks the person will be strong since he is selling crystal moss with purity that can only be found in 5-star dungeons. He also reported that there was someone with Min, but he needed to observe him a little bit longer. The idea that someone selling crystal moss of this purity got the boss wondering how strong they were. Park told him that they would at least be on the boss's level, intriguing the boss even more, and he asked Park to investigate Min and her partner. Park accepted the mission, revealing that his boss is Lee. A few days later in hell, Hyunwoo was doing some pull-ups. After doing 150, he dropped down from the bar. His strength level cap increased, but Hyunwoo was disappointed in himself. Just that light workout burnt him out. He would have been able to do more if he wasn't in hell. And while laying there exhausted from the pull-ups, he questioned how long he had spent in hell. A prompt popped up informing him that he had 18 hours and 15 minutes until he was assigned his next quest. Hyunwoo was getting used to hell after coming back and forth a few times. When he was in hell, time also passed in the real world, and the time left for the next quest moved the same as the real world. The only problem is that his location changed every time he returned from hell. He got the hang of everything else, but he just couldn't understand why his location had to change every time he returned from hell. He opened his status window and checked the skill he received earlier, Battle Helper. He learned that the skill optimized his accuracy by controlling his movements and also helping him make judgments by predicting the enemy's movements. If the skill were to be in a game, it would be an illegal cheat, something a hacker would use. Hitting a cheat skill like Battle Helper made Hyunwoo realize that he wouldn't be able to survive in hell without some cheat skills or plot armor. He approached a punching bag And before he could even throw a punch, the skill battle helper activated. As he was throwing punches, something was weird. It felt like he was automatically focusing his punches on one area. And finally, after a few more punches, the punching bag was destroyed. With this, Hyunwoo finally understood the functions of the skill battle helper. He was then assigned the new quest, A Beginner's Friend, and his objective is to kill 5 beginner scarecrows. However, Hyunwoo got angry. He was already level 7, and the system decided to give him a beginner's quest now. And on top of that, he didn't recall seeing any scarecrows during his time in hell, but he needed to increase his level fast, so he wore his clothes and moved out to find some scarecrows. He followed the crystal moss and found stairs leading down to a basement of a building that had been torn apart. He made his way down the stairs and found some creepy-looking robots. The appearance of the robots scared Hyunwoo, and he wondered why the creator of the robots couldn't have made them look nice. The system brought up the robots' information, and Hyunwoo learned that the robots were the scarecrows he was looking for, but he was shocked to see that there were question marks next to the scarecrows' levels. A shiver ran down Hyunwoo's spine after the thought of all the scarecrows suddenly coming to life came to mind. He picked up debris and hid behind it. Then, he took out a hell dart from his inventory and threw it at one of the scarecrows. The scarecrow didn't move after getting hit with the hell dart, so Hyunwoo ran in thinking it would be an easy win. He threw a punch, and to his surprise, even though he threw the punch with all of his might, it didn't feel like he hit anything. The scarecrow suddenly turned on, recognizing Hyunwoo as an opponent, and activated sparring level 1. Hyunwoo quickly realized that the scarecrows would adjust to match his level, and he protested to the system for not letting him know about the scarecrows beforehand. The scarecrows didn't care about his protest and attacked. Luckily, they were slower than the goblin that tried to kill him previously, so he was able to dodge. If you are level 7 in the real world, you would be treated like a bodyguard or a soldier with 5 years of experience. But in hell, he was being treated like a beginner. This angered him, and he activated the skill battle helper to deal with the scarecrows. However, he was quickly surrounded by the scarecrows. One of the scarecrows goes in for an attack. Hyunwoo dodged and countered, but this created an opening for one of the scarecrows to put Hyunwoo in a headlock. After struggling for a while, he managed to free himself and land a solid punch on the scarecrow's face. This triggered them to activate sparring level 2. 4 scarecrows immobilized Hyunwoo, and the other one proceeded to use him as a punching bag. As he was being used as a punching bag, his body's solidarity increased, hemorrhage resistance increased, and his pain resistance also increased. The scarecrows left him with less than 10% of his health left, and he started regenerating thanks to the title Last Man Standing. Hyunwoo started to question if he should run away from the scarecrows, but he hadn't landed a single good hit on the scarecrows, and his pride wouldn't allow him to run. Since the scarecrows were using martial arts, he took out a heinous club that had been strengthened out of his inventory to turn the tides of the battle. He rushed in and managed to break the hand of one of the scarecrows. Suddenly, the scarecrows also equipped their weapons, and the tide of the battle was no longer in Hyunwoo's favor. Hyunwoo died and returned back to the scarecrows and continued his fight. This time, he didn't use the club and relied on his fists. He was able to tie up 4 scarecrows, and with the help of the skill battle helper, he could handle the scarecrows in a one-on-one situation. He pinned the scarecrow to the ground and attacked its chest continuously until its core was revealed. He was about to destroy the core but stopped after the scarecrow activated sparring level 3. He wanted the scarecrows to get stronger, since the stronger they got, the stronger he would become. Later, he opened his eyes, trying to recall how many times he died after the scarecrow activated sparring level 3. He couldn't believe it. Every time he died, the scarecrow was using a different martial art, and he questioned how many martial arts the scarecrows knew. The scarecrow approached him, this time taking a fist fight stance. Hyunwoo was excited by this because he didn't think he would die in a fist fight. He attacked the scarecrow first and was pushing it back. The scarecrow activated sparring level 4 and attacked Hyunwoo's eyes. Hyunwoo flew back complaining about his eyes, but the scarecrow wasn't done and it proceeded to bite him. He died, and at the end of his 9th death, Hyunwoo realized 3 facts. 1. The scarecrows couldn't increase the difficulty past sparring level 4, which is why he wasn't noticing any new patterns in the scarecrow's attacks. 2. The scarecrows had a fixed pattern of moving, and if there were any differences, then it would stop to correct its movements. 3. There's no need for him to destroy the scarecrows. If they take a certain amount of damage, they would stop moving. So there is no need for him to totally destroy the scarecrows. After realizing these 3 things, Hyunwoo was able to defeat all the scarecrows and clear the quest Friend of a Beginner. This made him feel good, and he fell to the ground due to exhaustion. All he wanted to do was fight monsters on the same level as him, but that's not the type of place hell is. He questioned why the quest was named Friend of a Beginner when the difficulty was not something a regular beginner could handle. As compared compared to learning something, it was more like hell was beating the fighting techniques into him. He stood up and decided to check his rewards for the quest before he returned to the real world. He opened the silver chest and the quality of his reward was increased due to the effects of the title SSS rank Good Luck, and he obtained what looked like a golden wrapping cloth. The wrapping cloth was the legendary item Celestial Cradle, and it accelerates growth and fully restores any damage in the body. Hyunwoo understood the part about the cradle restoring damage in the body, but he couldn't understand what the growth acceleration was about. He was happy that he got another legendary item, but he didn't know how to use it. He questioned if he wrapped the cradle around his head if it would make him smarter. He wrapped the cradle around his head but quickly took it off because of embarrassment, and he was glad that no one was around to see what he just did. He continued to observe the cradle, and he realized that when he died and was revived he would be in perfect condition, meaning the cloth wouldn't be useful to him. He decided to sell the cradle when he returned to the real world, and opened his inventory to store it away. The egg he obtained when he was dismantling mosquitoes caught his attention, and because the cradle mentioned growth he figured it might work on eggs. He took the egg out of his inventory and wrapped the cradle around it. After a while nothing had happened and he questioned if the cradle didn't work on eggs. He decided to stop waiting and just sell the cradle when he returned back to the real world, but suddenly the egg started hatching. Hyunwoo became concerned. He hadn't thought about what he would do if a monster that wanted to kill him came out of the egg. But it was too late. The egg had already hatched and a fairy-looking monster came out. The monster was smaller than what he imagined, and he reached out his finger to pet it, and suddenly the fairy grabbed his finger and bit him. In shock, he threw the fairy into the ceiling and complained to the system for giving him a monster that wanted to eat him as a reward. The fairy stood up and told Hyunwoo that she was hungry. Hyunwoo took out a piece of candy from his pocket and asked the fairy if she wanted to eat the candy instead. The fairy refused and pointed at Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo allowed the fairy to drink his blood, and a while later he got irritated that the fairy was still drinking his blood, and he asked her to stop. She stopped and helped him stop the bleeding. Afterward, she complained about the taste of Hyunwoo's blood only being somewhat satisfying and asked him to bring out her dessert. This irritated Hyunwoo and he grabbed her, asking her to say those words again. Realizing that her life is in danger, she thanked Hyunwoo for letting her drink his blood. Hyunwoo decided to let go of her and introduced himself. He asked her for her name, and after thinking long and hard about it, she couldn't remember. The only thing she remembered is that she was supposed to appear at the end. This confused Hyunwoo and he asked her if she was some kind of superhero that appeared in the end to save the world. She replied with a smile, "No, I promise to eat all living organisms when the world ends." This didn't make sense to Hyunwoo. This small fairy creature was saying it is going to devour all living organisms when the world ends. Hyunwoo suddenly remembered that his blood was poisonous. The poison was so potent that it melted a goblin's arm, but she was fine after drinking his poisonous blood. He couldn't use the skill battle helper to defeat her because she wasn't hostile to him. He didn't know what her skill level is, and it looked like he wouldn't be able to just leave her behind. His only other option was to take her as a pet. Since he decided to take her in as a pet, he gave her the name Renian, which she accepted because it sounded similar to Agent of the Apocalypse in Pixie tongue. Hyunwoo then asked Renian to promise to never eat a human. Renian asked if that included him, and Hyunwoo replied that he didn't care about others, but she should never try to eat him, and if Renian was hungry to the point where she could die, he gave her permission to eat another human as long as it's not him, and in exchange for her promising he would give her some blood, Renian accepted, and after drinking Hyunwoo's blood again, she asked him why the scarecrows were destroyed. Hyunwoo explained that they were destroyed for his victory, but he noticed something strange. One of the scarecrows had been ripped in two. He recalled the battle with the scarecrows and came to the conclusion that he wasn't the one that ripped the scarecrow in two. Suddenly, a prompt appears informing him that the additional trait Valiant Energy had been added to Battle Helper. He picked up a scarecrow to test out the additional trait, and to his surprise, he destroyed the scarecrow with a single punch. Seeing what Hyunwoo had just done, Renian wanted to try too, and she replicated the move on another scarecrow. The other scarecrows were activated, and they surrounded Hyunwoo, but instead of recognizing him as an opponent, they recognized him as a superhuman, and they directed him to the corner of the room that was packed with debris. Hyunwoo started clearing out the debris, and as he cleared, Renian could smell something delicious. Hyunwoo continued clearing the debris and came across a skeleton. Renian took a bone from the skeleton and started eating it. Hyunwoo took the bone from her before she could finish it and placed it back where it was. There was also a letter that read, "It's been 3 years since the level rose to nightmare." The situation only worsened. Children who were born in the potent dust died. Hunters started dying out. Hope faded away and humanity went extinct. Hyunwoo was stunned. According to the letter and the message he saw when he entered, hell is the future of the real world, and for high-ranking ability users to die out as well showed the dangerous monsters that were about to appear. Hyunwoo couldn't figure out who left the letter behind, and Rinian, who was looking through the belongings of the skeleton, found a return stone and showed it to Hyunwoo. The return stone looked different from the one that brought him to hell, so he asked Rinian to give it to him so he could observe it. Rinian handed him the return stone, and suddenly it started glowing brightly. Once the light had disappeared, the return stone was gone, and Hyunwoo had a strange tattoo on his hand. A message appeared telling him that the stars were watching him, and a veil of darkness started surrounding Hyunwoo. He tried to get away, but it was too late. He was in a strange place with nothing around. He started calling out for Rinian, and suddenly a message appeared informing him that advancing Star Barul had recognized his absorption of the star fragment. However, the Star Barul became disappointed after seeing Hyunwoo and forfeited the fragment and left. This irritated Hyunwoo and he gave the star the middle finger. In anger, Hyunwoo started hitting the message that had popped up and accidentally lifted a lock. The system then explained that the owners of stars are beings who have absolute control over their own territory somewhere in space. These beings place their absolute power into fragments and lend them out. They do so in hopes that their kin will use this power to become rulers and expand their territory. Hyunwoo was in possession of one of these fragments. Because of this, the stars wished for him to become their kin. Hyunwoo realized that the return stone Rinian found earlier was the fragment the system was talking about, and after the explanation, all of the stars that wanted Hyunwoo to be their kin appeared. A prompt appeared asking Hyunwoo to choose the star he wanted to follow. However, he refused. Even if the system wanted him to choose, he wouldn't, since he knew nothing about the stars. So one by one the system introduced the stars to Hyunwoo, the shattering star Gaul, an absolute ruler who laughs behind a plotty mastermind. He rules over the masses with daggers, poison, and conspiracies, while staying behind the scenes. The waking star Verd is the father of all grief and melancholy. He commands an army of the dead and enjoys watching despair after destruction. Starving Star Yogyalim is a snake of greed and desire. The citizens of his territory are in a constant state of starvation, and his wish is to swallow the world. Whispering Star Monstrel instigates in the light and deceives in the dark, and she can deceive any powerful being to kneel at her feet. Conquering Star Aron is a loser who advances with fire and slaughters his enemies with steel. He wants to burn the world with meaningless hate and resentment, and he would be satisfied to rule over ashes. Hyunwoo became concerned. All of the stars sounded like they needed therapy. The system informed him that the stars become interested in those similar to them. Hyunwoo couldn't believe it. The system was basically saying he had the nature of a conspiracist with a personality disorder and is a greedy attention seeker who also has intermittent explosive disorder. Hyunwoo burst into a fit of rage, proving that the stars' assessment of his personality was correct. But even if he was all those things, somehow he thought he was better than the stars. He asked the stars what would change if he chose them, and one by one the stars showed him glimpses of what they had to offer. And again a message appears asking him to choose a star. Hyunwoo still couldn't choose, thinking about the fact that he was in hell. There is no way the stars would give something away for free, and he asked them if there was a price he needed to pay. The system explained that the stars raise their kin, and their kin will serve as a proxy for them. Hyunwoo then asked if he had to choose right now. The system explained that choosing a star is a rare opportunity, as he would receive their acknowledgement and continue to succeed in hell. His growth would become much faster if he chose a star. However, Hyunwoo didn't care, since there was nothing the stars could give him right now. A prompt appears informing him that the stars are feeling displeased with his arrogance. From the prompt, Hyunwoo concluded that the stars were telling him to watch his mouth, but this irritated him. He was happy that the stars were willing to grant him power just so he would follow them, but they were the ones that came to him. He didn't seek them out. This is his first time hearing about stars, so he couldn't just trust them out of nowhere. Even a used car dealer wouldn't be trying so hard to sell him in a deal. The conquering Star Aron lost interest in Hyunwoo and left. The other stars decided that it would be best to give Hyunwoo more time to think about their offer, and the black veil was lifted. The whispering Star Monstrel stayed behind and awakened a portion of Hyunwoo's abilities. He awakened the legendary skill Domination. She was giving him a pretty big bribe to choose her, but something was strange. If the stars are beings who could give out legendary skills that easily, why couldn't they stop the real world from becoming hell? There definitely would have been someone other than him who caught their eye. If the difficulty was on a scale where high-ranking hunters couldn't stop the real world from becoming hell, then it's possible that the stars were the ones who created hell. It looked like he would have to do more research about the stars. After returning from hell, Hyunwoo was lost in a forest for 3 days. He thought that it would be enough if he just focused on getting stronger in hell, but he now realized that there are still a lot of things he needs to pay attention to once he gets back to the real world. For example, never knowing where he would end up after returning from hell, and whenever he returned he looked like a beggar, so he sneaked around hoping no one would find him. But most times he was unlucky. After making it to Min's house, he told her that he wanted to buy a house. Min, who was drinking her morning coffee, was shocked. Hyunwoo looked like a beggar, and him needing a house came out of nowhere. Hyunwoo continued on saying he wanted a house that had sturdy walls and is clean like a hospital's disinfectant room. Min told him that buying a house isn't the problem. This confused Hyunwoo, so she explained that even though he had a lot of money, it all came from illegal ways. To the government, Hyunwoo was a powerless zero-star commoner that is mooching off of Min. Her words left Hyunwoo depressed, and she tried explaining that she was just saying others might misunderstand. After taking a quick shower, Hyunwoo went into the kitchen and cooked noodles. According to what Min told him, it would be hard to buy a house, and on top of that he needed a house that would fulfill all of his requirements. If he suddenly got the money to be able to buy a house, the people around him would get suspicious. If he wanted to be able to spend a lot of money at once, then it would be better if he got registered as a hunter and climbed up the ranks. He recalled the star that had left behind and gave him the legendary skill. He wondered why the system asked him to choose only one star. All of the stars possessed incredible strength, so why can't he have them all? He definitely wanted to get everything the stars had to offer. He didn't care if the world gets destroyed or if humanity goes extinct. He would just get stronger to make sure he survived, and then he can rule the world under his feet. Hyunwoo made up his mind to rob the stars for everything that they had, and Min, who was watching, asked him to stop acting like he was in a TikTok edit and eat the noodles he made. Hyunwoo turned on the news and started eating. The news was covering Lee's announcement of his plans to seal the Baekdu dungeon. Vinny had tried to seal the Baekdu dungeon, but failed, so Min questioned if Lee and his team would be able to do it, and it would be the first attempt to clear the dungeon again after North Korea was ruined by a flood phenomenon. Hyunwoo asked Min what the flood phenomenon was, and she explained that it's a phenomenon where monsters come flooding out of gates. The Baekdu dungeon was a 5-star dungeon, so the monsters that are coming out are also 5 stars. If your weapon isn't infused with mana, it would be impossible to take on a 5-star monster. It was a gamble trying to raid a dungeon like Baekdu. Lee was probably trying to seal the Baekdu dungeon because he was the first person in Korea to successfully raid it. Before he raided it, all the guilds said that it would be impossible to launch an attack in the north. Hyunwoo continued eating, and the reporter informed the viewers that the hunter's registration test would begin in 3 days. This test would be the best test in the year because Taesung Guild, Lee's guild, would be recruiting a lot of people for his plan to seal the Baekdu dungeon next year. Hyunwoo decided to check out the hunter's registration test. However, because he was getting constantly distracted, Min got irritated and asked him to focus on eating his noodles. The next day, the Hunters Association was completely crowded with hunters trying to get recruited by Lee's guild. While in line, Hyunwoo is shouted at to move forward. He angrily turns around facing the hunter that shouted at him. The ambitious hunter realized that Hyunwoo isn't someone he could handle and kindly asked him to move forward. It looked like it was Hyunwoo's first time at the association, so the hunter asked him if he was going to get evaluated. He told him that he was, recalling that the only time he got evaluated was when he was a kid at the orphanage. And after recalling, he questioned why he was the only kid that was getting evaluated at the orphanage. The hunter says he could tell Hyunwoo was a newbie by the way he was acting in the line, and explained that because the association didn't filter hunters, and those registering for the first time, everything is a mess. The waiting area is in complete chaos and it's overcrowded. Hyunwoo asked him if there were professional hunters mixed in with the newbies as well, and the hunter replied, of course. Since Lee's guild announced that they would be doing open recruitment, every hunter is here to try and get recruited. Hyunwoo asked the hunter if he was here to get recruited as well, and he told him that it would be too hard for him, and he just wanted to update his registered level. His level is something others can't see, so having the Hunters Association evaluate and acknowledge his ability will make it easy to join teams for dungeon missions. The line continued moving, but Hyunwoo became distracted, and the hunter had to push him as the line continued to move. Getting registered is the association determining your value. It made sense since not even guns can do what hunters can, so of course people would be obsessed with getting reevaluated so they could score more points and could gain control over their lives. But for Hyunwoo, if he draws too much attention, he would get noticed right away, so he needed to get registered quickly and rise up in rank before he gets caught for selling crystal moss illegally. After a while, Hyunwoo finally made it to the front of the line and had to go through 3 checks. First was the identity check, which was just for formalities, so most people got past without an issue. The second check is the status check, where they draw your blood and put it on the test papers. And the next check after the status check is the abilities check. To put it simply, it was combat ability evaluation. The average score would be close to 100, but just having a higher stat doesn't necessarily mean that a hunter is strong, so they don't really care about the numbers. Hyunwoo reached his hand into the machine, causing the numbers to go crazy. The ones conducting the evaluation were confused, questioning if Hyunwoo's strength had broken the machine. But the machine was fine, even when Lee took his test, so how strong would Hyunwoo's abilities have to be for that to happen? Hyunwoo asked them if he broke the machine, and they told him that he had nothing to worry about since it was a malfunction. And while they recalibrated the machine, Hyunwoo wondered if he would have to control his strength. After the machine was recalibrated, Hyunwoo decided to do the test with moderate strength. But again the machine broke. The doctors were puzzled and questioned if they should report it. However, they decided to recalibrate the machine again. A while later, after the evaluation was done, Hyunwoo received his score, which was pending review. The workers of the association entered the waiting area, explaining that they would be split into 3 groups. Those with an attack skill would go furthest to the right, those with a defensive skill would go in the middle, and finally those with a buff or abnormal skill would go furthest to the left. At the receptionist area, the receptionist complained about the evaluation team not doing their job properly and asked Hyunwoo if his skill was abnormal. Hyunwoo told her that it seemed that way, and she told him that he passed his evaluation. She asked him if he was going to take the hunter ability test. Hyunwoo replied yes, and she handed him a leaflet containing information about the test. She says that the test would be different from other times because they were collaborating with Lee, and even though it made her sound like a boomer, she told him that even though being a hunter might look cool, there is a chance that you could get hurt or even die. Hunters who earn a lot of money are in a minority, and because money is slow for those who aren't in the minority, they need to get other jobs. Hyunwoo told her that he wasn't getting registered as a hunter for the money. The receptionist asked him if he was doing it for fame or power, and he replied saying he was doing it because of a sense of duty to protect people. No one knows how dangerous the monsters in the dungeons would become in the future, so he needed to get stronger so he could handle it. The receptionist, thinking that Hyunwoo was speaking crazy, handed him his certificate of registration, leaflet, and emergency contact list. Then she told him that the theme of the test would be dungeon, and if he reads through the leaflet, it would provide additional information. A while later, a car pulled up at the association, and Lee came out instantly, drawing a crowd. He asked one of his guild members if the preparations were going smoothly, and the guild member reported that there were no issues. Continuing on, he reported that the Red Butterfly group had already arrived, and it seemed many other guilds were trying to recruit them, but the Butterfly group already had their minds set on joining Lee's guild. Lee told his guild member that the Butterfly group wasn't really trying to join his guild. Their goal was the Northern Expedition. The members of the Butterfly group were talented individuals, and they've ignored every guild's attempt to recruit them. But as soon as they heard news about the Northern Expedition, they all applied for the test. If it was Red Butterfly, the leader, she could have just applied to Lee's guild and she would have been accepted. Lee asked his members about the other newcomers taking the test. He reported that the other candidates couldn't compare to the Butterfly group, but there was one person with an abnormal ability. He handed Lee the documents containing the information on the candidates and explained that Hyunwoo is a hunter that has the poison blood skill, and from the documents it could be seen that the toxicity level was way higher than usual. Lee was impressed, but the poison blood skill had a lot of drawbacks. For example, if one mistake is made, then his teammates would suffer, so he would just keep Hyunwoo in mind for now. Inside the candidate waiting room, a man dressed in a suit approached Hyunwoo and handed him a tile. Confused by what the tile was for, Hyunwoo called out to him, but the strange man just walked away quickly. He couldn't follow the man because the test was about to begin. Over a speaker, it was announced that the candidates could enter the testing grounds. The candidates entered the Yongsan Hunter Association 3rd Gymnasium dungeon, which was modeled after the appearance of a 2-star dungeon in Ukraine. It was then explained that the goal of the test is to gather as many of the tiles that they received when entering. The theme of the test was dungeon, and for the next 3 hours they had to survive. Instantly after the test began, one of the candidates in Hyunwoo's group took charge, explaining that each person will have 1 tile, while monsters would have 1 to 3 tiles. The person to collect the most tiles would receive the reward, which means monsters weren't the only prey. They could also hunt other candidates. The candidate asked the others if they would like to move together like a group. However, Hyunwoo refused, saying he didn't want to. The candidate explained that it would be advantageous to join them because they had someone with a shield skill and someone who could heal. However, Hyunwoo didn't think it would matter. The rewards were going to be given to one person, and if they moved together they would have to split the rewards, and he didn't want to do that. The candidate asked him if he was refusing to join because of a selfish reason like that, and Hyunwoo replied saying he didn't need another reason. As he walked away, one of the other candidates grabbed him, saying instead of letting him go to get his tile stolen, he should just hand it over. This reminded Hyunwoo of something he forgot to do. He smacked the big candidate, knocking him out, and asked the others to hand in their tiles. The candidate that was explaining earlier surrendered. Hyunwoo asked him if he thought he would let them leave without taking their tiles just because they surrendered. The candidate threw him all of the tiles that they had. Hyunwoo asked him what he would do after losing their tiles. The candidate explained that there were no instructions on what happened to those who lost their tiles. That means they shouldn't be disqualified. And the person that Hyunwoo knocked out with one punch had the shield skill, so the rest of them couldn't possibly win against him. Hyunwoo told him that he didn't care as long as he got all of their tiles. Inside the observation room, Lee was impressed with how Red Butterfly was performing. On top of stealing all of her teammates' tiles, she was showing that she was on the same level as a 2-star hunter, and if the Red Butterfly group was together, they could definitely clear a 3-star dungeon. And if they got the support they needed, they will be able to grow even more. But that being said, there was no need to pay too much attention on the results right now, because as time went on in the test, only those with talent will remain. And even though surviving the test was important, Lee was also looking for talented people who are able to take on the monsters that were prepared for the test. That's when things got interesting. Seeing the monster that the Red Butterfly was facing, the guild member asked Lee what the monster was, and Lee explained that it was the D&W Industries' newest development, an independent android that's still in the early stages of development. It was an android that had practiced using attack gloves and has an epidermis made from the spores of a mushroom monster found in the Chernobyl dungeon. The official name was Mushroom Droid. Even though the name wasn't impressive, it was made from integrating only the best technologies. Its combat ability is exceptional, and its endurance and mana reflection abilities are outstanding. Because the spores of the epidermis have regeneration qualities, there are lesser repair costs. The man asked Lee if the droid wouldn't be too hard for most hunters to face, and Lee says that that wouldn't be the case. You see, most of the droid's attacks are weak, and if a team works well together, they should be able to defeat the droid just fine. The problem comes when someone is facing the droid alone, like Red Butterfly, who likes going solo. It would take time for her to get used to the droid's attack patterns, and it would be difficult for a solo player to retrieve the tiles, since the tiles are deeply embedded within the droid. However, all the preparation that was made to keep Red Butterfly in check, she was just crushing them. Then Lee noticed that an unforeseen situation had occurred. Back to the test, Hyunwoo was angry. He was really looking forward to facing real monsters, but the droids didn't move well, didn't speak, and their attack patterns were too simple, and even their stats were low. This left him bored out of his mind. After defeating all of the droids that attacked him, he picked one of them up and used the dismantling skill to retrieve the tile. However, the fact that the tile came out so easily concerned him, and he questioned if it was supposed to come out that smoothly. It was then announced that 34 minutes had passed, and more than 30% of the tiles had changed hands, and a ranking will be revealed. In third place was Hongryun with 7 tiles, second place was Red Butterfly with 9 tiles, and first place was Hyunwoo with 16 tiles. Hyunwoo knew that this would happen, although it would have been better if he faced goblins instead. The droids that he called scarecrows were just too easy. He decided to check the other items he got from dismantling the droid. He received the common item Spore Eroder's flesh. He didn't think that items would drop from the monsters, but complained about the items not being better. If the scarecrows from hell were made from the Spore Eroder's flesh, maybe that's why they are so durable. He put the flesh around his arm and realized that he could create something with it. He used his creation skill and crafted the Spore Eroder's knee guard and the Spore Eroder's arm guard. With his preparations done, it was time to take care of the rest of the test. A while later, Red Butterfly was looking at the leaderboard in disbelief. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't surpass Hyunwoo. She was then attacked by the other candidates, but she quickly dealt with them. More arrived surrounding her. As she was getting ready to face them, Hongryun came rushing through the candidates. After making it to the center, she asked Red Butterfly to stop going ahead of them since she could get hurt. Red Butterfly told her that she was rushing because she didn't have enough points to get first place. Hongryun told her that points aren't what's important. The original plan was to meet up with the Northern Expedition, and they already had enough tiles. The candidate that was in Hyunwoo's group named Red Snake explained that if they combined their tiles, they would have 88 tiles. Red Butterfly told them that she didn't want to combine their tiles and asked them to stay close. Afterward, she left. Inside the observation room, Lee asked who Hyunwoo was, and the man explained that it was Hyunwoo's first time being evaluated. It seemed like his evaluation had been put on hold, and Lee asked if he was the one with the poison blood skill. The man answered saying he is, and Lee asked if it didn't seem like Hyunwoo had experience in dungeons even though he was just registered today. Every action he made showed that he was used to being in a dungeon. But that would mean he is one of those people that entered a dungeon without permission. Lee's guild member asked him if he was suggesting that Hyunwoo was a rogue, but that wouldn't make sense because Hyunwoo didn't have a criminal record. Lee explained that Hyunwoo might be from an outside country since the regulations in other nations aren't too harsh. Of course, he was only saying that it could be a possibility. Lee thought it would be great if Hyunwoo and Red Butterfly hurried and fought each other. He was excited to see how it would go down. Back to the test, Hyunwoo decided to try the spore eroder's flesh, but spat it out because it was so disgusting. The taste was so bad that he wouldn't even try to eat it even if he was starving to death. He sensed that something was approaching him at high speeds. When he turned around, he noticed that Red Butterfly was about to attack him. He dodged the attack, and Red Butterfly asked him if he was working alone. Hyunwoo teased her, saying he had 150 lackeys waiting for his order. She concluded that he was working alone and told him that she was looking forward to fighting him. She rushed in for an attack. Hyunwoo blocked, and from the force of the attack, he concluded that he would die if she landed a hit on him. And if he didn't have the skill battle helper to help him dodge the close ones, he would be in trouble. Since the skill battle helper could adapt mid-battle, he didn't have much trouble dodging, but he still couldn't find an opening in her attack pattern. If things continued like this, he would lose to her. Although he had a skill he was saving because it could be dangerous to humans, but it should be fine if he tried it with on Red Butterfly. Above all else, the skill was his last option. He applied Valiant Energy to Battle Helper, and the two rushed at each other. As their fists made contact with each other, the Valiant Energy that Hyunwoo applied to Battle Helper caused the bones in Red Butterfly's arm to break. She admitted defeat and took out her bag of tiles for Hyunwoo. As Hyunwoo was approaching the tiles to pick it up, Hongryun appeared out of nowhere and hit him like an NFL linebacker. Hyunwoo was sent flying into a wall, and after recovering, he noticed Red Snake, the guy that he took the tile from in the beginning of the test. Red Snake never thought he would meet Hyunwoo again and gave him his name. He explained that Hongryun and Red Butterfly were in the same group as him. Hongryun angrily turned towards Hyunwoo and asked if he did this to Red Butterfly. At this point, Hyunwoo was starting to get angry, and he said, "Yes, I did that. So what?" He was about to continue on his rant, but it was quickly announced that the 3 hours had passed, and the ranking would be announced shortly. In third place, Yoonteak with 21 tiles. In second place, Hyunwoo with 69 tiles. Nice. Finally, in first place, Red Butterfly with 88 tiles. Hyunwoo questioned why he didn't get first place, and Hongryun explained that they gave Red Butterfly their tiles, and because Hyunwoo couldn't collect Red Butterfly's tiles in time, she got first place. Red Butterfly tried to explain to Hyunwoo that it was a misunderstanding, and he should have been the one in first place. However, Hyunwoo decided to forget about it since he couldn't go back in time. As he walked away, Hongryun called out to him, asking him to apologize for breaking Red Butterfly's arm. Hyunwoo wanted to turn around and teach Hongryun a lesson, but he couldn't afford getting too much attention, so he thought about his options. It made sense that Hongryun is upset about him breaking Red Butterfly's arm. He understood where she was coming from, but why is she making it seem like he was trying to rob her? He fought fair and square and won. They stole first place from him, and now she is making it seem like he was the bad guy. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he needed to teach Hongryun a lesson. He activated the skill Domination. Hongryun, who was mouthing off, suddenly froze. To her, it looked like Hyunwoo was surrounded by 5-star monsters, and above everything around her, even her allies, looked like monsters. Hyunwoo regretted what he did. He wanted to teach her a lesson, but it was looking worse than what he had in his head. He didn't know what to do, so he ran away. Inside the observation room, Lee and his guild member were stunned. The guild member asked Lee if Hyunwoo won because Red Butterfly had let her guard down. Lee knew that Hyunwoo's last move was too precise to be a fluke, but it still didn't make sense. It would make sense if they were the same level, but for a hunter who isn't even level 10 yet to beat someone twice his level is unheard of. The guild member asked Lee if he would like to meet up with Red Butterfly first, but Lee told him that he would meet with Hyunwoo first. Inside the waiting room, Hyunwoo was cooling off. He was fine when using the skill Battle Helper with Valiant Energy, but Domination used up too much of his mana. He wondered if he would have this raging headache until he returned to Hell, and wished he didn't use Domination on Hongryun. The guild member that was with Lee in the observation room approached Hyunwoo, congratulating him for successfully passing the test. He introduced himself as T Minsu, the secretary team leader of Tisun Guild. He handed him the guild card and explained that because he possessed great skill, the Tisun Guild would like to recruit him and provide him with all the necessities to improve his level. The Tisun Guild would make sure he reached his highest potential as a hunter, beyond what any other guild could provide. Hyunwoo grabbed the guild card and asked Minsu if the Tisun Guild could help him reach the stars. Inside Lee's car, Lee watched the video of Hyunwoo and Red Butterfly's fight. He couldn't get enough of it, and it was like he was watching a movie. Minsu knocked on the car door window, and after Lee rolled down the window, he lowered his head and apologized. Lee could tell that Hyunwoo rejected the T-Sun Guild's offer. Minsu says Hyunwoo wasn't interested even after he raised the conditions. Lee expected this. He had a feeling this would happen because strong hunters like Hyunwoo have a sense of pride, and he asked Minsu the reason Hyunwoo gave for rejecting the offer. Minsu says that Hyunwoo talked about reaching the stars. This shocked Lee, and he asked Minsu if what he said was correct. Minsu explained that he thought it was strange to, or maybe a new term young hunters were using, but he isn't sure what Hyunwoo meant, and asked Lee if he knew what Hyunwoo meant. Lee says it was his first time hearing the term stars as well, and asked Minsu if Red Butterfly accepted their offer. Minsu reported that Red Butterfly accepted just as they planned. Lee praised Minsu on his good work and told the driver to take him home. As he drove off, he thought about what Minsu had reported. Since he couldn't tell Hyunwoo's intentions when he brought up the stars, he couldn't determine what he wanted. But one thing is for certain, he had to keep an eye on him. Inside Min's car, Hyunwoo was looking over some cards. Min asked him what they were and he explained that it was the guild cards of all the guilds that tried to recruit him after the test was done. She then asked him what was in the box that was on his lap. Hyunwoo opened the box, recalling what had happened after he left the waiting area. Red Butterfly approached him and apologized for what Hongryun did during the test. He didn't know what she was talking about at first, but then remembered that Hongryun was the muscle mommy from before. He was just trying to scare her so she would shut up, but he ended up sending her to a hospital. Red Butterfly gave him the prize for coming in first place because it should have been his in the first place. She begged him to take it. Hyunwoo explained to Min that he really didn't have a choice but to accept it. The first place prize was the rare equipment, Tenacious Grip gloves, and it's something Hyunwoo thought would be useful. Min then told Hyunwoo that the crystal moss he brought back from hell this time was all sold to Park again. It looked like Park had been going around looking for crystal moss, and even if Min sells it to another buyer, Park will find a way to get it for himself. Hyunwoo questioned why the old man was buying all that crystal moss. Even if crystal moss was a ruby that has a high innate value, does anyone need that much of it? If there was someone giving him orders behind the scene, then that would explain how he got the funds and why he was buying so much crystal moss. And if that is the case, then he wanted to contact the boss directly instead of meeting with the middleman. Bro activated some Sherlock Holmes level deduction skills. However, it didn't seem like directly contacting the boss would be easy. Min asked him if he got anything else from the first place prize, and Hyunwoo recalled that there was a prize money too. He turned the box upside down looking for the money, and a check fell out. He then asked Min if she wanted to go to a restaurant before they headed home, showing her the check for 50 million. Later, after having dinner, the two arrived home. Hyunwoo was impressed with the prize the association gave out. Min explained that the association had respect for hunters, and because of all the fame and money, ordinary people think living the hunting life is easy. Min asked him if he shouldn't be careful with how he was spending his money. However, Hyunwoo didn't think there was a point in worrying. He was now registered as a hunter and was only spending his money. Suddenly, he sensed murderous intent. He told Min to get back into the car and lock it. As he walked away following the murderous intent, he told Min not to get out until he returned. After arriving at the location where the murderous intent was coming from, he noticed dead bodies in Park. He asked him what he was doing behind Min's house. Park explained that the dead bodies that were on the ground were members of the Japanese Yakuza. They were after the crystal moss that Hyunwoo was selling. It's very valuable even in the overseas market. The Japanese Yakuza aren't the only ones interested in the crystal moss Hyunwoo had. Even the top-ranking hunters were looking for him. Park explained that if he hadn't protected the house, Min would have gotten hurt. Hyunwoo asked him what he wanted in return for protecting Min, and Park told him to create an alliance with the T-Sun Guild. Realizing that Lee was behind this, Hyunwoo told Park that he rejected the T-Sun Guild's offer earlier. Park ignored him and continued on. He says that he looked into Hyunwoo, but surprisingly he couldn't find anything, as if someone erased every information about him. The crystal moss he sells can only be obtained from high-level dungeons. The consequences for showing off during the test is catching up to him. Not just that, Park learned from Lee that Hyunwoo was moving during the test like someone who had been entering dungeons for a long time, and yet his career was dungeon cleaner. Something was fishy. Park thought he was working with an organization, so he advised him to form an alliance with T-Sun Guild again. Hyunwoo thanked him again and told him he wasn't part of an organization. Thinking that Hyunwoo is lying, Park decided to take a different approach and asked him to be understanding if he is a little rough. Hyunwoo's skills automatically activated, sensing that he was in danger. Hyunwoo called out to Park trying to explain the misunderstanding, but Park suddenly attacked him with his cane. Hyunwoo dodged the attack, and from that awkward position he attacked. Park didn't bother to dodge, expecting that the punch would have no effect because Hyunwoo was in an awkward position. But to his surprise, the punch pushed him back, and Hyunwoo says he started this, so he is just defending himself. Park took off his trench coat. If Hyunwoo didn't want to take his advice, then he would have to play rougher. He threw the trench coat at Hyunwoo and pulled out a sword. Hyunwoo complained, saying a sword was cheating, and as Park was about to slice him, Battle Helper activates, helping him dodge the attacks. Park continued to attack, pushing Hyunwoo to the wall. He couldn't back up anymore, so he used the walls as a spring and jumped over Park. After landing on the ground, he gets happy that he got behind Park, but suddenly Park attacks. He dodged the attack and used the domination skill, stunning Park for a moment. Using this opening, he grabbed Park's collar, getting ready to put the old man to sleep. But suddenly Park's body became heavy, and he asked Hyunwoo if the domination skill was illusionary, which would be odd. He cuts Hyunwoo's wrist, saying he didn't cut his neck on purpose because he didn't plan on killing him. And he asked Hyunwoo who he was working for. Hyunwoo started laughing concerning Park, so he asked him what he found so funny. Hyunwoo asked him if Lee didn't give him the full information about the test. Park looked at his sword, realizing that the steel was melting away. He hadn't taken into account Hyunwoo's poisoned blood. But before he could react, Hyunwoo grabbed his face and pinned him into the wall with his bleeding hand. Hyunwoo asked him if he didn't spend time building his poison resistance, even though he was so high level. To free himself, Park broke Hyunwoo's hand and sent him flying with a kick. He quickly took out a potion from his jacket and used it on himself. Hyunwoo, who was healed, stood up, asking Park to give him some of the potion. Park couldn't believe it. He was certain that he made contact with Hyunwoo's arm and ribs, so how was he standing there like nothing had happened? He asked Hyunwoo if he had a healing skill. Hyunwoo dodged his question and asked him if he wanted to continue. Park looked at his broken sword, realizing that he couldn't continue the fight, and told Hyunwoo that he was done fighting. His goal was to offer him a deal, not to fight him. Hyunwoo reminded him that he was the one that attacked first. Park explained that he was trying to convince him with force, but Hyunwoo gave him more resistance than he planned for. Again, he started to wonder which organization would be able to train Hyunwoo to this level. This irritates Hyunwoo, and he says, "Listen, old man, I don't work for an organization. I work alone if we're not counting Min." Park asked, "Where are you getting your crystal moss from?" Hyunwoo told him that it was his business secret, and Park explained that if he joined the Tisun Guild, he could have everything he imagined and more. Hyunwoo told him that he promised himself that he would never work for someone, although that could change if Park decided to work under him. Park laughed, asking Hyunwoo to stop talking nonsense, and if he had nothing else to say, then he would take his leave. Park was someone Hyunwoo wanted to work with for his connections, and after finding out that he is also a capable hunter, he couldn't lose this chance. And as Park was walking away, he asked him why he thought the Tisun Guild was so great. He heard they were smaller than the Rank 3 Guild Almighty Lotus, and their average member is weaker than a Rank 2. He asked him if the Tisun Guild was just popular because of Lee. Why not drop them and invest in someone who is young and talented like me? Park replied, saying, "I believe there are two types of people that go around saying what he just said. First is a fool that's unaware of reality, and second is a loser drowning in their own ambitious thoughts of becoming successful like Lee." Hyunwoo laughed. For someone who just lost to him, Park was being a little harsh, and even if he tried to use the damage blade, Park couldn't touch him. Park directed a skill at him and explained that if he fought with the intention to kill, then Hyunwoo wouldn't be left standing. Got a taste of humbling pie. On top of that, there were plenty of members in the Tisun Guild that were stronger than him, and on top of them all was Lee. And for someone like Hyunwoo, who hasn't even reached level 10 yet, to disrespect Lee wasn't even funny. Hyunwoo asked, "What is so impressive about Lee?" "I will show you that I am better than Lee, but tell me, how much stronger do I have to be compared to Lee?" Park laughed and told Hyunwoo that Lee reached level 20 less than half a year after becoming a hunter, which was only possible because Lee had the backing of the Tisun Guild. For a regular person, it would take them a year or more. So if Hyunwoo wanted to show him that he was more talented than Lee, he would have to show him something impressive. Hyunwoo told him that he will get to level 20 in 2 weeks, and if he could do it, then Park would have to become his business partner. Park told him that his bet isn't something he could laugh at. He didn't know where Hyunwoo was training, but for his sake he hoped it was better than where Lee trained. As Park walked off, Hyunwoo smiled, saying, "Don't worry, I know just the place." Later in hell, Hyunwoo had a goblin pinned on the ground and was using him as a punching bag. The goblin bit his fist, but soon realized that his blood was poisonous. The goblin stopped biting Hyunwoo's fist, but Hyunwoo shoved his fist down the goblin's throat, edging him on to eat the food he put in his mouth. After a little struggle, the goblin died and Hyunwoo leveled up, reaching level 15. The conquering star Arden started observing Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo lifted his hand at the sky to give the star the middle finger, but he quickly realized that his hand was deformed due to what he did to the goblin. He wrapped a bandage around his hand, realizing that he shouldn't be pushing his body this hard. Suddenly, Renian appeared out of nowhere, screaming at Hyunwoo that fairies are scared of fighting, and he dared to continue fighting. Seeing that Hyunwoo was injured, she poked her staff into the bandages and asked him if she should try to apply some pressure, and started drinking his blood. Hyunwoo became irritated, but calmed down after realizing that he could be revived if he died. But he wasn't sure if he could survive if she drank his blood in the real world. At least things were getting better compared to wandering around trying to find monsters. This was a big improvement. The only problem is the goblin from his first day in hell. Out of all the goblins he killed, he still wasn't able to find that goblin. That goblin was stronger than all the other goblins he's seen. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Hyunwoo instantly backed off, questioning where the goblin appeared from, and he called out to Renian to get away from the goblin and find a place to hide. But she had already disappeared. Seeing its dead comrades, the goblin let out a battle cry. Hyunwoo asked the monster what it was doing. He never thought that monsters would get sad after their own kind is killed. He shouted at the monster to stop wasting his time and attack him. The goblin was sent into a rage and it rushed at Hyunwoo. He died, and after reviving he received a new quest, enemies on a wooden bridge, and his object is to kill the goblin that killed him. Hyunwoo laid there exhausted. He really pissed off the goblin by killing his friends. Well, no matter how strong it was just a goblin. All he had to do was lure it into a trap like any other mob and get some poison-laced thumbtacks to use in the trap. As he made up his plan to kill the goblin, it appeared behind him and killed him. Hyunwoo died, and on his sixth try he was running away from the goblin. He questioned if killing the goblin's friend triggered some kind of event, because the goblin wasn't even giving him a second to rest. Honestly though, the goblin was the one who started it first. The goblin attacked, and Hyunwoo countered, giving him hope that he could survive if he just countered the goblin's attack. However, shortly after the goblin killed him, he realized that he is no match for the goblin, and questioned if he should just hide like a coward after reviving. There is an old saying, revenge only leads to more revenge, and forgiveness is the only way to obtain victory. If that's true, then it might be better if he forgot about the goblin and spent his time trying to level up. But he would rather die than run away like a coward. He has no plans of letting anyone get away with anything against him, nor is he going to live his life with regrets. If anyone tries to stab him in the back, then he will make sure they pay for it. But if he ran away just because he couldn't get revenge, his pride wouldn't be able to handle it. After dying again, Hyunwoo disappeared, and the red-capped goblin spent days looking for him. He couldn't find him, so he questioned if Hyunwoo had run away. Redcap couldn't stop searching yet. It was too early to relax. Not only can Hyunwoo revive, he is crafty. It couldn't stop looking for Hyunwoo because it didn't know what he was planning. No matter what, he couldn't let Hyunwoo reach them. Suddenly a goblin called out to Redcap, saying something terrible had happened to the others. It informed Redcaps that the others were dying because someone put poison in the drinking water, so Curson needed to return right now. Inside the goblin's hideout, multiple goblins were bedridden due to the poison. Curson and the goblin from earlier were observing the food and water supply. The goblin explained that the water poisoned their food sources. The goblin questioned who would do something so cruel, but Curson knew Hyunwoo was the only person capable of something like this. But he questioned how Hyunwoo managed to find their hideout. He concluded that Hyunwoo probably followed him back. Then a goblin approached Curson, asking him to take a look at one of the goblin babies. The baby goblin was Curson's son, and seeing his sick child brought Curson to tears. Curson stormed out of the hideout to find Hyunwoo. The others followed behind, trying to stop him. They asked him what he planned on doing against an enemy that can revive. The goblin says they should give up on taking revenge, so Hyunwoo would stop bothering them, where they could run away and find a new hideout. Curson lifted his sword in the air. The sword started to glow. The other goblins asked Curson if they were speaking to him. Curson says they were, meaning they had no choice but to pursue Hyunwoo. One of the goblins pointed out the body of the scouts they had sent out recently. Curson could smell the poison and knew instantly that it was Hyunwoo's doing, but it could also be a trap, so he ordered the other goblins to return. The other goblins refused. They didn't want Curson to face the Curl human alone. Curson explained that Hyunwoo is leaving hints behind to lure them away from the hideout, so they needed to return to prepare in case he attacked. The other goblins asked him to return with them, but Curson says he would stay and hunt Hyunwoo down. Although Hyunwoo is growing faster than he expected, he is still stronger than him. He explained that he could kill Hyunwoo with his eyes closed, so the others had nothing to worry about. The goblins knew Curson was strong, but Hyunwoo could come back to life. Curson told them not to worry because he promises to come back alive. With this, the other goblins decided to put their faith in Curson and return to the hideout. Curson continued his hunt for Hyunwoo, and a while later Hyunwoo attacked him with a hell dart. Curson smiled and told Hyunwoo he wouldn't give him a painless death. Hyunwoo told Curson that he would give him a chance to die by his hand. Curson asked him why he seemed confident. Hyunwoo asked him to think carefully and explained that if he wanted to, he could have killed all the goblins in the hideout, and although he only killed a couple, he's not sure if he would be merciful next time. Just like Curson said, he could keep coming back alive. but would Kurson be able to stop him from killing the goblins in the hideout? Kurson lifted his sword and said he would cut Humu's limbs and take him back alive as a captive. Humu grabbed his sword saying, "Even then I will kill myself and come back to life." He threatened Kurson's family and explained that Kurson could do nothing about it. However, all he wanted was his revenge. He didn't want to hurt his family, but if Kurson kept attacking him, then he would have no choice but to get his revenge on his family. The goblin dropped his sword and asked Humu if his life is all he wanted. Humu didn't want to waste time and told Kurson that his life is what he was after. Kurson asked Humu to keep his side of the deal and leave after he killed him. Humu bent over to pick up Kurson's sword. He says if Kurson would have done this from the start, then he wouldn't have hurt the other goblins. As he was picking up the sword, Kurson sent him flying with a kick. Then Kurson picked up his sword and jumped at Humu. Humu blocked his blade. Kurson damned Humu, asking him if he thought he would believe his lies. And just as promised, he would make his death very painful. Kurson started striking Humu and brought him below 10% health. Humu started regenerating. He smiled and told Kurson that he should have killed him in one hit. He punched Kurson, then grabbed him by the neck and lifted him in the air. Then he sent him flying into a wall with a punch. He told Kurson that he was holding back a lot, and he even gave him a chance to end this. Humu tackled Kurson into the walk and proceeded to use him as a punching bag. Kurson couldn't believe it. He thought Humu was on the brink of death but questioned how he was regenerating so quickly. He questioned how Humu managed to get so strong in that short time. Humu could tell exactly what was going through Kurson's mind and explained that Kurson was careless. Since Kurson had been killing him in one hit this entire time, they never actually fought each other. Kurson got cocky, believing he could kill Humu whenever he wanted, making him careless. Kurson told Humu not to get cocky because he could still kill him whenever he wanted. He attacked him to take his neck but suddenly fell to the ground. Humu smiled menacingly. He explained that it was too late for that because he didn't plan on being careless like Kurson. He showed Kurson the hell dart that he used to stab him. Kurson started begging him to listen to him. He explained that goblins couldn't live in hell without blessing. Humu smiled, asking Kurson if his people would really die if he killed him. Kurson explained that without him they wouldn't be able to survive and would die slowly. Humu smiled again, wondering if he would get the experience for their deaths. Then he beheaded Kurson. Humu completed the enemies on a wooden bridge quest and received a silver box that was converted to a golden box. He leveled up 3 times, and his return stone was activated. Renian appeared, asking Humu if the battle was over. Humu told her that it was, and said she could eat Kurson's body once he was done inspecting it. Humu was trying to find what made Kurson so strong. His physical capabilities were too great for him to be reliant on a weapon. He noticed that Kurson's hand had writings on it, so he picked it up to observe it. Suddenly, the shattering star gall started guiding his hands, and the writing on Kurson's body transformed into a black ball. Humu managed to absorb a piece of the shattering star gall. He also learned the legendary skill family. Later, Humu teleported back to the real world and was in Min's house and woke her up. Min was acting strange and told Humu that she was going to the convenience store. Humu stopped her, asking if something was wrong. He started questioning if he should tell her the truth. Min explained that Park came back a few days ago asking for Humu. She told him that he wasn't here, but that got her thinking why Park would ask for Humu. It didn't seem like it was for Crystal Moss, so she questioned if something happened while he was gone. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had no clue what was happening with Humu. What was Humu doing when he disappeared, and what other secrets could he be hiding? She didn't care what it was. Humu involved her in it, so he should take responsibility. She wanted to know why he keeps disappearing and appearing in strange places. He never explained what was going on, so she felt uneasy. Humu grabbed her, asking her to calm down. He says he would explain everything to her. Humu understood why Min was acting this way. She was deeply involved in what was happening, and even if something urgent was happening, she pretended like it wasn't bothering her. He also gets help from her, and it's gotten to the point where he couldn't think of living without her. If something happened to her down the line because he was keeping secrets, then he would be all alone, and if that happened, he would go insane. He explained everything to her, the return stone and hell. He explained that the return stone is why he kept disappearing. Because of that, it was harder for him to figure out how long it would take to return. She asked him if one day he wouldn't return. Humu told her no matter what he would return, so he wanted her to be his lighthouse. She snuggled close to him, saying she didn't just want to be a lighthouse, and if he needs help then she would rescue him herself. Humu told her that he hadn't showered in a while, so she shouldn't be close to him. She laid on his lap, saying she hadn't showered yet, and asked Humu if he wanted to shower together. One day later, Humu exited Min's house because the day he promised Park had passed. He needed to act quickly. In the time he was trying to figure out how to contact Park, he arrived to give him a ride. Inside the car, Humu told Park that he was level 20, but Park couldn't believe it. Humu Hyunwoo apologized for returning late and explained that he had certain issues. Park apologized to Hyunwoo saying he can't believe him since there is no way to check his status window, and Hyunwoo asked him about their deal. Park says he already gave him his answer back then, but given the trouble he went through, he would stop forcing him to form an alliance with Tisun Guild. On top of that, he is willing to buy the crystal moss at an increased price of 15%. Hyunwoo said it needs to be 30%, explaining that if Park was going to break their promise, then he needed something more because he worked hard to reach level 20. Park started emitting murderous intent, saying Hyunwoo hadn't changed even after all the work he put in. Hyunwoo smiled and asked Park if he thinks everything would be solved if he got angry. He took out the crystal moss from his inventory, asking Park if he knew what a monopoly is. Park should know well how special the crystal moss he sells is, and no one other than him could sell crystal moss of that quality. It is just as he said, he had a monopoly on the crystal moss, so if Park kept giving him the cold shoulder, then he would stop selling. Park says he was already matching the highest price in the market for 5-star dungeon crystal moss and is willing to pay 15 extra, but he couldn't pay anything higher. Hyunwoo stored the crystal moss back in his inventory. He threw something at Park saying he would give him something more interesting than the crystal moss. Park caught the item, asking Hyunwoo what he was doing. Hyunwoo asked Park to open his hand and see for himself. It was nothing special, but should work as a deposit. Park opened his hand, shocked to see the legendary item Trust of Our Haste, which doubles the owner's senses temporarily in use. Hyunwoo knew that someone like Park would recognize the item immediately and explained the effects of the ring. He told Park that not even Lee would give him a present like that, and says he was more useful than Lee. He told Park to keep it until he admits he was better than Lee. Park couldn't believe it. The ring was without a doubt a legendary item, which is nothing compared to the gloves he had last time. However, based on the shape of the ring, it looked like there should be another that matches it. He asked Hyunwoo if he happened to have the other ring. Hyunwoo says he wasn't sure because that was the only one he found. Park was a little disappointed, but they should be able to find the other ring soon enough. He told Hyunwoo that he would send him his money at double the price he offered, because if the amount of crystal moss Hyunwoo had this time, it would be hard on Min, so Park offered to take care of it so they could evade the National Tax Service. Hyunwoo was impressed with Park's skills, and that's why he was trying so hard to get him to join him. And he also had the other ring. The ring tracks the owner of Trust of Our Haste and can temporarily lower their experience gained by 50%. Park asked Hyunwoo if he wanted anything else, and Hyunwoo asked him for his car. Later, Min exited her workroom to pick up a call from Hyunwoo. She made her way outside, angry about the fact that he is bothering her while she was at work. Hyunwoo, who was standing next to Park's car, called out to her, asking what time she planned on going home. Min asked Hyunwoo how he got the car, and he told her he got it from Park. Min asked him if he drove himself to her workplace. Hyunwoo said yeah, explaining that it wasn't hard, so maybe he should just get his license. This angered Min and she dragged him into the car. The two proceeded to have a lovely date. Later at a gym, Hyunwoo and Park were having a sparring match. While using Hyunwoo as a punching bag, Park explained that a guild isn't just an organization of hunters. It was a place for hunters to train and ready their bodies for the battlefield known as dungeons. From advertising, tax evasion, housing, clothes, training, health services, transport, everything a hunter could ever need will be at their whim. Every guild is like a small company. Among them, Tisun Guild has the best benefits. Whether it be for glory or money, it's a loss not joining the Tisun Guild. Hyunwoo says that even then he won't be joining the Tisun Guild, and launched a counterattack. However, Park countered his counterattack and sent him flying. He praised Hyunwoo's reaction time, but is a bit sad he didn't get to see his regeneration like last time. Hyunwoo recovered from Park's attack, saying his ribs were fractured, and that Park is only winning because he wasn't using skills. Irritated by Hyunwoo's cockiness, Park took off his shirt, and as he attacked Hyunwoo, he asked him if he would join the Great Unknown Guild instead of the Tisun Guild. While dodging Park's attack, Hyunwoo says the guild seems a little shady. Park told him he wasn't wrong, since the only information known about the guild leader is his name. Hyunwoo asked Park about the Rank 3 National Associations of Hunters. He heard they were down to earth and welcoming to others. Some people even say the NA's kindness is too much. Hyunwoo found an opening in Park's attack pattern. He took this opportunity, thinking it was his chance to finally land a hit. However, Park quickly grabbed his hand and broke it. Hyunwoo was brought below 10% health and he started regenerating. Seeing Hyunwoo regenerating, Park was intrigued. He questioned if the broken hand was healing or just moving back into place. He realized that's what happened the last time he fought Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo sat down, asking Park if he was happy now. Park says he is excited to see what may happen to Hyunwoo down the line based on his absurd growth speed. And now that they were done feeling each other out, he asked Hyunwoo why he called him here. Hyunwoo told him he just wanted to return the car, and asked Park if he heard of beings known as stars. Park asked him if he was talking about the system all hunters use. Hyunwoo told him he wasn't talking about the system, but things like shattering stars. Park was surprised that Hyunwoo knew about stars. He himself only heard about stars from the top rankers. It is something only the chosen few know about. Other guilds only mention stars in their name, like the guild known as Reverse Cross Crusade that uses the Star of Bethlehem as their symbol. Hyunwoo asked Park what the Star of Bethlehem was, and Park said Hyunwoo would find out about them down the line. He also asked Hyunwoo if he wanted to try and clear a dungeon. However, Hyunwoo didn't want to, and he asked Park why he brought it up all of a sudden. Park explained that if Hyunwoo was planning to not work for a guild and rise up the ranks like Lee, then he would need to attract the attention of people. Hyunwoo needed to learn how to socialize with others. Hyunwoo still didn't want to. A true introvert to the core, Park told him that even though he has a secret dungeon that he trains in, there is no official record of him actually entering a dungeon. And with no records, getting information would be hard. And if he kept going like this, he would be seen as a hunter with no experience. Not knowing what to do, Hyunwoo asked Park what he should do, and Park angrily told him to enter a dungeon. Park explained that even geniuses need to learn the basics, and he was willing to prepare everything. All Hyunwoo had to do was get ready and go where he told him. For now, he told Hyunwoo to wait for his call. A while later, Park's phone call came, and Hyunwoo had to go to Chingai Mountain. The Chingai Mountain has a permanent one-star dungeon, which is a place where people who just awaken can test their abilities. On top of that, normal citizens come by to hike and look at scenery, so Hyunwoo questioned why Park sent him to this dungeon. Suddenly, a hunter holding a plate started beating on the plate, calling all the hunters to gather in front of her. And as they gathered, she counted them, making sure the 5 hunters were present. She then explained that she was the overseer from the Great Unknown Guild, and her name is No Hail. As she explained why the hunters were assigned an overseer, the new hunters could tell Hale had been drinking. First, Hale explained that many cocky hunters that try to clear the dungeon often start fights with others. There have been a lot of accidents due to those hunters. Because of that, any party is assigned an overseer as a preventative measure. A mid-rank hunter from each guild would come and follow them if they planned on raiding the dungeon again. And if they didn't want her in their business, all they had to do was not start fights with each other. Next, she explained basic dungeon rules. Assuming that they knew dungeons get harder with every star, Hale explained that they were premature and mobile dungeons. A mobile-type dungeon constantly changes, making it hard to predict and complete. On the other hand, a premature-type dungeon has a set terrain, making it a lot easier to predict and complete. Which means a one-star dungeon like Jingichin should be easy as shit to complete. But even if they encounter danger, she would step in. All that talking made Hale woozy, and she threw up in front of the new hunters. She apologized to them, saying she was out late last night. With all that out of the way, it was time for the hunters to introduce themselves, starting from the left. First was Park Seomun, a 2-star hunter. Second was Han Najeong, a 1-star hunter. Third was Kim Seoing, a 1-star hunter. Fourth was Kim Suhwan, another 1-star hunter. Finally was Hyunwoo, and although he was strong enough to spar with Park officially, Hyunwoo was only a 1-star hunter. Hale instantly closed the distance between her and Hyunwoo and took a good look at his face. She listed different middle schools, high schools, and colleges, asking Hyunwoo if he went to any of those. Hyunwoo said he didn't. Hale tried her hardest to think but couldn't due to the hangover. Since she couldn't remember, she guessed it wasn't important and asked Hyunwoo if he brought any equipment. Hyunwoo used the create skill to create a stick, impressing Hale with his skill. However, even though his skill was impressive, Hale asked him if he really planned on fighting monsters with a stick. Hyunwoo explained that the stick was pretty special because it causes any monster he hits it with to drop their item. Seomun was angry, asking Hyunwoo if he was playing some kind of joke. Hyunwoo had been acting funny for a while, and now he is trying to use a stick as a weapon like some comedian. He took off his backpack and dropped it on the ground, asking Hyunwoo how he planned to kill the monsters with just a stick. The bag fell over, revealing a bunch of weapons. Seomun says Hyunwoo should have brought more weapons than him since he was only 1-star. He picked up a sword from the pile of weapons, telling Hyunwoo he should buy weapons for their value. He pointed his sword at Hyunwoo and said if even a 2-star hunter like him is carrying around weapons like this, a 1-star should be twice as equipped. Hale quickly dashed at Seomun, flipping him into the air and grabbing the sword. Then she struck the sword into the ground next to Seomun's face. She asked him if he was crazy because showing off weapons outside of dungeons was prohibited. She explained that showing off can cause discourse and anxiety for normal civilians, and even if Seomun was a newbie, did she really have to teach him the basics of the basics? Seomun apologized relaxed and she handed him his sword back. With this settled, it was time for them to start heading out. Hale was a middle-class hunter from a large guild, and although she wasn't as strong as Park, she was still pretty strong. And Hyunwoo wanted to test out her abilities. As Hyunwoo was standing there, Kurson appeared from his shadow with bloodlust in his eyes. Hale brought them inside the dungeon and explained that more goblins will appear the deeper they go in the dungeon. She asked the group if any of them read the notes on how to clear the dungeon. Like a teacher's pet, Xiaomun raised his hands and answered, "We need to obtain the return crystal." This was the correct answer, and Hale says when they arrive at the goblin spawn point, they will see a cave. Inside the cave, they will obtain the return stone, fulfilling the first clear condition. There are multiple clear conditions, and everyone they fulfill will greatly increase the reward. But since it was the newbies' first time clearing a dungeon, Hale wanted them to focus on getting the return stone. Finally, she explained that as long as the situation isn't too dangerous, they shouldn't be expecting help from her. After Hale was done explaining, Xiaomun quickly took the leadership role. He wanted to assign roles to the others, but he remembered that goblins have a sensitive sense of smell, so he wanted them to start by getting grass to hide their scent. And in order to be prepared for any sneak attacks, he reminded them to be mindful of their heads. Hyunwoo refused. He thought Xiaomun's orders were weird. Xiaomun approached Hyunwoo asking what was so weird about his orders. Everything he said he learnt from the famous hunter streamer Wild Breath. Hyunwoo didn't even have proper gear, but he is saying a famous streamer's tips is weird. Hale stepped in between them, trying to stop things from escalating. Hale told Hyunwoo to try and cooperate with the others, and she asked him why he thought Xiaomun's orders were weird. Hyunwoo explained that he didn't want to cover himself in grass. Goblins have a sensitive sense of smell, like Xiaomun said, and if their sense of smell is that sensitive, they would be able to differentiate between fresh grass and grass that's been ripped out. He also didn't see the reason why they had to watch their heads. The goblins were short and they were in a forest, so they should watch their ankles instead. Angered, Xiaomun charged at Hyunwoo, but again Hale stopped him. She says what Xiaomun is saying would be true if it was 10 years ago. She explained that what Xiaomun mentioned is tips by the streamer Wild Breath, who is busy clearing 3-star dungeons now. It's been a while since Wild Breath cleared a 1-star dungeon, and tips for clearing dungeons change all the time. On the other hand, what Hyunwoo mentioned made sense for the current era. Hyunwoo's idea is pretty detailed. Intrigued, Hale approached Hyunwoo. She wondered if knowledge like Hyunwoo's could be learned without experience. To her, it almost felt like Hyunwoo had a lot of experience hunting down goblins. Hyunwoo smiled and thanked her for the compliment. However, he told her he just did his homework. Hale was still suspicious of Hyunwoo, so he told her not to be suspicious because this was his first time in a dungeon, and entering a dungeon without notifying the government is illegal, and he wouldn't do something illegal. Xiaomun laughed, saying he wasn't the only one who searched things up in the internet. Before anyone could respond, a goblin suddenly sprung out from the bushes and attacked. Hyunwoo kicked the goblin away like a fly, shocking the others. Hyunwoo turned around and asked the others if they still thought his stick was useless, but they all thought it wouldn't count because he didn't use the stick. Hale told Hyunwoo if he continued acting this way, he would start fighting in the group. And since goblins might appear at the drop of a hat, they should stop the arguments and actually start this dungeon raid. Later on, Hale observed the newbies' fighting skills from a distance as they took on the countless waves of goblins. She was impressed that none of them were scared when face to face with a goblin, and if they continued like this, they would be able to clear the dungeon with only a few scratches. But something has been feeling off about the dungeon for a while now. Before the newbies started fighting, the goblins seemed to be scared. There is no way goblins would be scared of a couple of newbie hunters, and Halo questioned if there is something else that's scaring the goblins. Once the newbies were done, she planned to send them back and investigate the situation more. Suddenly, she heard the screams of some of the newbies. She quickly rushed towards the party, and after arriving, she asked them what was wrong. At the scene, the party was stunned at the sight of corpses of goblins, some hanged and others with mutilated body parts. The party didn't understand because this is an area where they hadn't been. Halo declared the situation as an emergency, telling them they would return as soon as they found the return stone. Halo thought something was off because not only were the goblins massacred, their bodies were played with. This isn't something that should happen in a 1-star dungeon. She questioned if a human or monster did this. But whatever thing did this, it would be dangerous, not just to the goblins, but possibly them as well, so they needed to leave before anyone got hurt. She looked around and noticed Hyunwoo was missing. She asked the others if they knew where Hyunwoo went. However, they just noticed Hyunwoo was missing. Hayo ran deep into the forest calling Hyunwoo's name, and Kurson watched her from the bushes 1 hour earlier as the party faced off against a group of goblins. Hyunwoo became disappointed with the goblins' quality. The challenge they posed wasn't even close to the goblins in hell. They had poor weapons and no real sense of strategy. He could understand why Haol seemed so calm in this situation, and since they didn't seem busy, Hyunwoo decided to head out by himself. After he was a distance away, Hyunwoo used the family skill and summoned Kurson from the shadows. The reason he summoned Kurson is because he wanted to assign him his first job. The family skill allowed him to designate someone as family, and it would bring them from the dead as long as the body isn't too deformed. But that wasn't the only thing that made the skill broken. He told Kurson to go out into the woods and kill all the monsters he could find. He narrated that the skill also allowed him to summon them out of hell, and Kurson asked Hyunwoo what type of monsters he wanted him to kill. Hyunwoo told him he was talking about the goblins. Kurson protested, asking Hyunwoo if he wanted him to kill his own kind. Hyunwoo smiled and told Kurson he would destroy his tribe if he didn't, and as they were talking, a goblin saw them from a distance and began approaching them. Kurson turned around and began approaching the goblin to follow out Hyunwoo's order. As Kurson was walking away, Hyunwoo felt something strange, and he questioned if it was because of Kurson. He concluded that it must be because him and Kurson were now connected by the family skill and could share emotions. The emotion he was feeling was somewhat uncomfortable and disgusting. It seemed like Kurson was trying to deny something. Kurson looked at the goblin, questioning if he was really looking at a goblin. It couldn't speak or wield a weapon. He struck the goblin, questioning if this creature who wears rags for clothes and him were the same species. He laughed menacingly, saying, "Don't make me laugh." He ripped the goblin apart, saying, "This creature in front of me isn't a goblin." Hyunwoo finally realized what the emotions he was feeling from Kurson was. It was hatred for his own race. He realized that Kurson doesn't want to believe a creature that weak is the same species as him. Kurson continued to rip the goblin apart, repeating to himself, "No, no, no." Two more goblins appeared, stunned at what they were seeing. Kurson jumped at the goblins, saying he would end these disgusting creatures' existence. Hyunwoo watched as Kurson ripped the goblins apart. With this, Hyunwoo was ready to join the group again. In the present, Haol continued to call out to Hyunwoo, and the other party members followed closely behind her. Haol was getting concerned. Hyunwoo might be dead already, and she couldn't continue making noise. Hyunwoo suddenly popped out of the bush, saying he finally found them. Haol ripped Hyunwoo a new one. She asked who allowed him to act on his own. Hyunwoo informed her he just wanted to use the bathroom. She was still angry about what he did, but she was glad he didn't look hurt. She asked him if he had any injuries. Hyunwoo explained that he wasn't hurt, but questioned what happened to the party. Haol says she would explain later and told him to stay close while they looked for a return stone. As the two were discussing, the other party members noticed the return stone. Seamoon suddenly ran towards the return stone. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. He could tell by Haol's reaction and the dead bodies that something was wrong, and there's no way in hell he is going to continue to put himself in danger. Kurson appeared out of nowhere and tripped Seamoon with his hook. Kurson lifted his hook and prepared to strike Seamoon. Haol quickly rushed in, blocking Kurson's attack and saving his life. The two began facing off, and Hyunwoo observed. Haol is a middle-class hunter from one of the 3 strongest clans, so he was wondering what she could do against a goblin from hell. Hyunwoo smiled menacingly. The idea of seeing the two of them face off was very interesting to him. The two clashed. While watching, Hyunwoo narrated that the family skill allowed the skill user to give out orders, but it has one major drawback. If the target bounded by the skill is higher level than the skill user will have limited control. However, this wasn't a big issue for him right now because he could threaten Kurson with his family. He thought Kurson was making a scene because he was frustrated. This wasn't just hatred of his own kind, so he was questioning if it was his way to express his pain. He is happy that Kurson hasn't turned his attention to the newbies, and the only thing that is important is testing Haol's abilities. Back to the battle, Kurson suddenly tried to attack the others, but stopped halfway and maneuvered above Haol and managed to land an attack. Haol questioned how something this powerful is in a 1-star dungeon. It had better gear than most hunters, and it was extremely meticulous and sly with his movements. She didn't think a mere goblin in a 1-star dungeon could hurt her. She activated the skill Accelerate, and it looked like she disappeared in front of their eyes. Hyunwoo quickly ordered Kurson to run away. Kurson quickly started running away, but Haol was now able to keep up with Kurson. She was able to leave a scar on Kurson's body. For a short period of time, the skill accelerates every movement the user makes. Haol thought if she didn't hurry, the party may be harmed. That's why she activated the skill to deal with Kurson as soon as possible. She appeared behind Kurson again, prepared to end it with this attack. Kurson used a smoke bomb, and Haol quickly pulled back. When the smoke cleared, Kurson was holding Snamun hostage. He told Hale if she moved he would kill him. Hale was completely stunned. A goblin shouldn't be able to talk. It wasn't intelligent either, so how was this possible? She did her best to assess the situation, but too many questions were running through her mind. And if she lost Kurson here, something worse could happen down the line. And if that happened, many more lives would be lost. Halo lifted her blade, apologizing to Snamun. Humu took his stick from his inventory and picked up a rock and hit the rock towards Kurson. He told Hale that she shouldn't let a junior who might have potential die that easily. Kurson barely managed to dodge the attack. Humu acted like the stick raised his stats to the point where he could put holes through trees. Hale told Humu to stand back so he wouldn't get hurt. However, Humu moved in front of her and asked why he had to follow her orders. Hale asked him what he meant by this. Humu narrated that Hale was a lot more disappointing than he thought. He didn't think she would be struggling this much against a level 21 goblin. He questioned if everyone her level would be this skilled. But if that was the case, that would mean everyone on her level is weak. If Halo fought against Kurson when he was alive, she would have been killed in an instant. He communicated with Kurson using telepathy, questioning why he threatened to kill a human when he told him not to. When Kurson was attacking Hale, he had full intentions of killing her, so Humu was questioning if Kurson wasn't fully under his control. And if things keep going like this, he might end up killing someone. He told Hale that if Snamun died, it would become a hassle for her. Although some would see it as cruel, he understood, because if she lost sight of Kurson, things might have gotten worse. On top of that, he hadn't done anything during the raid, and if he left right now, he wouldn't feel very accomplished, so he asked her to be understanding. Humu picked up another piece of rock and hit it towards Kurson again. Kurson dodged, and using this opportunity, Hale rushed in. Because of a single mistake she made, one of the newbies almost died, so she wanted to make up for it by killing Kurson. Humu intercepted her and began clashing with Kurson. However, Kurson wasn't strong enough to continue blocking Humu's attack, and he was pushed back. It didn't seem that Humu wanted to kill Kurson again, because he warned him that Halo was about to attack him from behind. Kurson was able to counter Halo's sneak attack, but that left him in a vulnerable position, and Humu took advantage of that. Kurson angrily looked at Humu. Humu communicated telepathically again, saying getting hit with a stick is better than getting stabbed in the back. Halo appeared again and the two began to clash. Halo was pushing Kurson back because he was expecting Humu to attack again. Halo pushed him back into Snamun, who was passed out. Kurson kicked the passed out Snamun at Halo, immobilizing her. He towered over her, getting ready to attack, but Humu stopped him and told him to use this opportunity to get lost. Kurson quickly used a smoke bomb and disappeared. Halo shouted, disappointed in herself for letting Kurson go. And with this, Humu's first dungeon came to an end. And he was also able to create an unbelievable accident that no one on the outside would believe. He chuckled to himself, proud about his accomplishments. Hale found Kurson's blood trail. She told Humu to look after the others and quickly follow the blood trail. However, in the end, she couldn't find Kurson. Outside the dungeon, she asked the team in charge of monitoring dungeons if the dungeon met any hidden conditions. The person says it hasn't, explaining that there aren't signs the dungeon changed. It was still a permanent dungeon, and other hunters who entered at the same time as them didn't experience anything different. The person was concerned for the new hunter's safety, and he really wanted to help Hale, but there's nothing he could do with the stories she just told him. Outside the dungeon management office, Hale sat on a bench. She thought she should be satisfied with the fact that nobody got seriously injured. Humu interrupted her thinking. He asked her if she was okay. She thanked him for his concern and asked if he needed something. Humu asked her if she took care of the goblin. Hale showed Humu Kurson's hat, saying she found the goblin, but she wasn't able to recognize it. When she found the goblin, it was dismembered by someone else. It seemed the other goblins noticed it was injured and decided to finish the job. She took his hat as evidence because she needed more time to look into it, although someone almost lost their life because of her decision. Humu stopped that from happening. She reached forth her hand, thanking Humu for everything. Humu looked at her hand and said, before I answer, do you think I will be able to enter a 2-star dungeon with my skill? Hale took a moment and thought about what Humu just said. If the goblin they faced was from a 3-star dungeon, she wouldn't be surprised. She could also say without a doubt Humu had the skills to easily clear a 2-star dungeon. She told Humu that his skills surprised her. She asked him if he was a hunter who took a long break. Humu said no, and she asked him if he entered the 1-star dungeon because of the restrictions on the rankings. Humu expressed he entered because of something similar to that. Hagel asked him if he was associated with a guild yet. However, Hyunwoo was starting to get suspicious and he asked her if she was trying to gather dirt on him. Hail expressed that she wasn't. Hyunwoo was a skilled hunter who entered a one-star dungeon with an observer, and he wasn't currently associated with a guild. So she thought he was looking for a guild to join. She pulled out her guild's card saying she hoped Hyunwoo would visit them. She thought Hyunwoo would become a huge asset to the guild if she helped him grow, so she tried to hand the card over to Hyunwoo saying her guild would provide him with support. Hyunwoo turned down the card saying he needed more time to think about it. She was confused saying Hyunwoo would need help to clear higher star dungeons. Hyunwoo walked away expressing that he was doing fine by himself. He also didn't want to divide the loot he got from the dungeons with others. Inside an office, the leader of the research team was making a report on her computer, and one of the workers rushed into her office reporting news that they received something strange. She picked up a cup of coffee and threw it at the worker. She says the worker shouldn't report anything to her unless it's a 5-star. The worker dodged the cup and showed her the report, leaving her completely stunned. She quickly took it out of the worker's hands and asked if there wasn't an error with the machine. The worker says they checked the machine and even the drug usage, but everything was working correctly. She didn't know how to respond. If it was a 5-star, she would have thought it was interesting. If it was a 6-star, she would have screamed. And if it was a 7-star, she would have told the worker to check it again. Another worker rushed into her office reporting that he received something strange from the Gangnam Hunter Management Center. He says they checked the results 3 times, but they got the same results each time, and both reports were on the same person. Another worker rushed in reporting that the unknown guild is willing to pay them a lot of money if they gave them the documents on a certain person before releasing it to the public. She asked the worker for the name and he reported Hyunwoo. This shocked her and the other 2 workers because all 3 of them were reporting on the same person. She laughed and told the worker to ignore the unknown guild's offer. This confused the worker because they were willing to pay a lot of money. She threw him Hyunwoo's reports and asked how much he thought the guild should pay for that. Hyunwoo was a 7-star and all of his stats were S rank, so she asked her worker to investigate everything about Hyunwoo. She wanted them to make sure everything about Hyunwoo stayed confidential until they found out more about him. For hunters, there is a rating system known as rank that is separate from their level. Within each rank there is a level bracket, and once the hunter reaches a certain level in that rank, it becomes almost impossible to level up further. First is rank 1 and the max level is 20, second is rank 2 and the max level is 30, third is rank 3 and the max level is 40, and finally is rank 4 and the max level is 50. Because of exposure to mana, normal people are able to awaken from being rank 0 to rank 1. However, in the case of hunters who are already awakened, it has never been reported of their rank increasing. And recently Hyunwoo was able to reach level 20, which is the highest level possible for his rank. This made him wonder if it would be possible to increase his rank. Then he got an unexpected call from Min, so he made his way to her laboratory. When he arrived, she asked him to strip and started drawing his blood. Hyunwoo asked her if it was really possible to find out his rank with this test. She says of course and explained that the Hunter Bureau can only administer a temporary test to figure out a new hunter's rank because of budget. However, in the lab Min worked for, they could flush out the details the Hunter Bureau couldn't. Hyunwoo trusted Min even though she was a graduate student that still hasn't published any doctoral dissertations. The good thing is Min was working in a lab that's researching ways to increase the rank of hunters. However, Hyunwoo became concerned about his poisonous blood. But his blood was being contained by the test tubes just fine, so he questioned if his poisoned blood had certain conditions that made it activate. But that is something he could figure out on his own. And with this, the testing was done. After the testing was done, Min took a shower. And afterwards, she handed him documents regarding his rank increase. Although increasing rank is all about being exposed to high mana density. Hyunwoo looked at the documents and thought there is one way. Later, Hyunwoo entered Hell to figure things out. A message appeared informing Hyunwoo that he still had over 9 days until he is assigned a new quest. Hyunwoo finally realized the timer until the next quest is based on the time he spent in Hell. So it would be better to spend as much time in Hell whenever possible, but he needed to be doing something to make that time worth it, so he started creating things. First, he created the legendary item Short Blade Flowing with Blood. This craft was only possible because he had Crystal Stone. Crystal Stone is a highly effective item that is generated when dismantling rare items using the dismantling skill. When you synthesize the Crystal Stone with other rare items, it creates a legendary item. Renain and Kurson were watching Hyunwoo. Renain explained to Kurson that the Crystal Stone also helped with blood circulation. The sight of a legendary item had driven Hyunwoo crazy for power. He turned to Kurson asking him to give him half of his rare equipment. However, Kurson didn't want to, so Hyunwoo told him he would make it worth his while. The starving Start Yagolim began observing Hyunwoo, and 9 days later Hyunwoo created the Arm of Oshit. The house he was staying in was old, but he made sure it would work well as a shelter and his test dummy. He slashed the wall with his dagger repeatedly, and after causing major damage, he was satisfied. At first he was worried because he only had one glove for his left arm, but now he is getting used to it. In the last 9 days, Humu did everything he could. But since he couldn't level up, most of his time was spent creating items and enhancing his skills, and also mapping out his surrounding area, but he was still questioning if all of his preparations would be enough. He was then assigned the quest bottom of the pyramid, and his objective was to survive being chased for 24 hours. The starving star Yagolim attempted to challenge Hyunmu, and if he accepts the star's challenge, the difficulty of the quest will increase, but so will the reward. Recently, Hyunmu had been trying to find ways to get stronger without leveling up, but not a single method worked. However, this might make him stronger, so he accepted the star's challenge with a smile. Suddenly, all of the stars that were showing interest in him began to observe him. Yagolim's challenge triggered a new quest, and Hyunmu's new objective is to survive being chased by members of Yagolim's family. The curse Tasty was also placed on him. Hyunmu checked his body, wondering if the Tasty curse altered it. However, he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. Renain and Kurson sneaked up on Hyunmu, looking like they would devour him at any moment. Hyunmu noticed and quickly pulled back. He ordered them to stay away from him. This made Renain sad, and she says Hyunmu has become tasty, but he isn't willing to let them get a small bite. Hyunmu asked Renain if she knew what kind of curse the quest had placed on him. Renain could barely contain herself and told him the curse added extra seasoning. Renain explained that there are spices you can taste at Yagolim's banquet hall. While Hyunmu is under this curse, everyone around him would find him irresistible. However, if the monsters eat Hyunmu, they will become addicted, and nothing else would be able to satisfy them. Renain said she should be fine if she had a little taste of Hyunmu, since she has a promised ending. She says all of the people under Yagolim are already under the taste curse. His domain is a hell filled with greedy people who live survival of the fittest style. While the two were talking, Kurson had been taken over by his urges. Hyunmu punched him, sending him flying backwards. Kurson asked Hyunmu why he hit him, and said he had full control. However, Hyunmu wasn't taking any chances. Hyunmu asked Renain if the curse meant all living things would be trying to kill him. Before she could answer, a horde of mosquitoes broke down the door and attacked Hyunmu. The mosquitoes forgot Hyunmu's blood was also poisonous, and they started falling one by one. The mosquitoes confused Hyunmu because they shouldn't have been active during these hours. Renain explained that mosquitoes are a part of Yagolim's domain. Although they are the youngest species currently in his domain, mosquitoes were one of the fastest monsters, meaning the others would be arriving soon. Hyunmu went outside and was being watched by a horde of pigeons. He started running away, and the pigeons and mosquitoes chased after him. As he ran, he questioned how he was supposed to deal with all of the monsters by himself. He turned to Kurson, who was running beside him, and asked him if he had space in the goblin village. Kurson explained that the birth rate went up recently, so they were struggling with space. Hyunmu didn't know what to do. He made sure he was prepared for everything, but he never thought the mission would have something to do with mosquitoes and pigeons. He noticed that Yagolim was watching him struggle with his challenge. He noticed a cliff and leaped in. He complained to the star for not giving him an opponent he could face off against. At the bottom of the cliff, a horde of weird-looking monsters were waiting for him. However, the horde of monsters made Hyunmu happy because it was a real opponent he could face off against. He rushed into the horde of monsters, however, just one was enough to immobilize him and take a huge chunk off his face. He died and respawned. But the members of Yagolim's domain found him and continued to kill him over and over again. And Yagolim watched, enjoying every moment. So instead of facing the monster, Hyunmu ran away. Hyunmu realized that this was entertaining for the star, and this was Yagolim's goal from the start. But now that he accepted the challenge, he has no choice but to play hide and seek with monsters. He asked the star why he didn't just ask to cook him instead. He looked around and noticed Kurson was missing. He questioned what he would be doing when he was in a situation like this. However, he didn't mind because it would be a bother if he had to worry about Kurson's life too. But the problem is he was alone, and he didn't know how he would survive this quest by himself. Suddenly, he heard a voice telling him to turn right into the alleyway. Hyunmu turned right but began to question where the voice was coming from and if he was talking to himself. He heard the voice affirming he was talking to himself, and again told him to turn right into the next alleyway. Hyunmu began to question if he finally went crazy after dying so many times. Again, he heard the voice telling him he wasn't crazy. But there are a lot of people who think so. Hyunmu had no idea what was going on with his body, but he had no choice but to follow the voice's directions. He didn't know what to think, so he thought a ghost possessed him. The voice spoke, saying it wasn't a ghost. Hyunwoo continued to follow the voice's direction as he was being chased by a horde of Yagolim's people. The voice brought him to a monster under a pile of rubble. After seeing Hyunwoo, the giant spider monster stood up, and as the monster attacked, the voice told Hyunwoo to duck. The spider's attack hit Yagolim's monsters, immobilizing them with its spider silk. Hyunwoo quickly checked the spider's level and was shocked to see it was level 87. The voice told Hyunwoo that he would be safe until Yagolim begins to get annoyed. Hyunwoo was speechless. He wondered who would dare do something like this. The voice asked Hyunwoo who he thought it was, and Hyunwoo quickly remembered the Whispering Star Monstrel. Monstrel told Hyunwoo not to worry because everything that was happening will look like a coincidence to Yagolim. She also told him not to speak out loud and to act like he was thinking of a plan. If he doesn't, Yagolim will catch on quickly. Monstrel was able to communicate with Hyunwoo by reading his mind. Hyunwoo asked Monstrel if she was the only one able to read his mind. She explained that other stars could read his mind, but they can only read his mind when he thinks about talking to them. Hyunwoo then asked her what she wanted in return for her help. She explained that Yagolim is planning to feed Hyunwoo to as many of his family members as possible in order to grow his rank, so she wanted him to stop this pointless challenge. She says she also wanted to make him her family member. Hyunwoo knew this was what she was after and asked her why she was so interested in him. He says he is only marginally better than a goblin. Monstro says the stars needed a new player. Everything is at a stalemate and everyone is trying to come up with a plan to solve things. She says if Hyunwoo knew what the others wanted to do to him, then he would become her family member in an instant. Hyunwoo asked her if she was saying serving her is better than the other stars. She replied saying of course, telling Hyunwoo that compared to the others, serving her would be simple. All he had to do was love her, praise her, worship her, and obey her. She says it wouldn't be anything strange because it would be similar to a lover's relationship. Bro is really rising up a god basically. I need to write this down somewhere. She says if Hyunwoo wanted, she would return that same kind of affection to him. Hyunwoo began to fall for her words. They sounded so sweet, almost like he fell into a deep swamp, and as long as he acted like her lover, he could gain more power. Being approved by everyone is what he wanted, and she was willing to provide him the power to do so. He started questioning why he was pushing himself to survive in hell alone. He almost told her he would become a part of her family. However, a message informing him the Star Gull was watching him quickly snapped him out of it. He rejected Monstrel's offer, saying he had a girlfriend. Monstrel was silent, so Hyunwoo began to question if he pissed her off. He wouldn't be surprised if she stopped helping him now. Monstrel showed him her true form. She thought it was a waste for someone only like Hyunwoo to have one woman. She thought he would come to his senses after being eaten by Yagolim's family members a few times. Hyunwoo had not come to his senses. However, even though Hyunwoo rejected the easy way out, she still wanted to provide a way for him to overcome Yagolim's challenge. Suddenly, mini spiders started crawling up Hyunwoo's hand. Monstrel says she would complete his incomplete toys for him and blew him a kiss. The spider wrapped Hyunwoo in its spider silk and carried him back to its den. A while later, Kurson and Renane arrived at the spider's den looking for Hyunwoo. As they approached one of the wrapped-up bodies, Kurson asked Renane if she was sure this body was Hyunwoo. She asked him to stop doubting her and to free Hyunwoo quickly. Kurson ripped the silk off Hyunwoo, but he was still passed out, so Renane woke him up with a punch. Kurson told them that they needed to start moving. Renane asked him to wait. She flew to Hyunwoo, saying if she drank his blood he would feel better. Hyunwoo angrily told her if she tried anything he would send her back to where she came from. Renane cheered nervously, saying Hyunwoo was awake because of her, and he would be useless if she wasn't around. Hyunwoo was getting sick of the little fairy and chased after her to teach her a lesson. But after a while he couldn't catch her, so he stopped, and they started heading out of the spider's den. Hyunwoo was a little bit disappointed in himself because he almost failed Yagolim's challenge again. As they were walking, Hyunwoo ran into the body of an orc. He stepped back, getting ready to fight the orc, but he quickly noticed the monster was already dead and was being held up by spider silk so the little spiders could eat easily. Fascinated, he continued to observe the orc's body. Kurson tried to ask him a question, but Hyunwoo interrupted him, saying he is too busy to answer his question right now. Kurson says he wasn't asking a question. He was just curious about the item Hyunwoo had on his left hand. It was an item he had never seen before. Confused by what Kurson was talking about, Hyunwoo looked at his left hand and noticed the Oshit gauntlet had transformed. In his confusion, he quickly remembered what Monstrel told him before he passed out, and he quickly opened his inventory to take out Admiral Len's monocle to check what happened to his gauntlet. Renane asked Hyunwoo where he got the monocles from, and Hyunwoo explained that he got it from the place they found the skeleton last time. This impressed Renane because Hyunwoo was now stealing. Hyunwoo used the monocles and learned that the gauntlet changed to Oshit's six-finger hand, a rare legendary item. The item increased the grip strength of the arm it's equipped on by 3. It can be equipped by both hands, and once Hyunwoo grabbed hold of something, the gauntlet wouldn't let go unless it's destroyed. Where Hyunwoo is willing to let go, it can also use mana to shoot out Widow Spider's web. This surprised Hyunwoo because it was an item he had never seen or heard of before. He began to question if all the items he was making could be fakes of the original. That would mean this gauntlet is a higher grade than legendary. Hyunwoo smiled menacingly. With this new toy, he could totally complete Yagulim's challenge. A while later, Yagulim's family members were drawn to a tunnel pipe by Hyunwoo's blood. They rushed into the pipe chasing the source but were caught up in spider webs. Then mosquitoes flew in and injected one of the monsters with blood. It was Hyunwoo's blood, so the other monsters mindlessly started eating their own kind. Hyunwoo, who was deep in the tunnels, smiled at how easy this was. He repeated this process over and over again. Listening to the sound of the monsters fighting each other, he narrates that before he started the quest, he was experimenting using the mosquito with his family skill. There was a limit to how many things he could control, but when it came to small beings like mosquitoes, he found he could control more small beings than large beings. On top of that, if a mosquito dies from his poisonous blood while under his family skill, they come back to life with a slight resistance to poison. With this strategy, he could easily take care of those high-level idiots. Kurson says it's unfortunate to see strong beings with no brain. Hyunwoo agreed, praising Kurson for being strong and smart enough to find a place like this. It was the perfect place to hide out while he dealt with the ghast. There were plenty of exits, so he wasn't worried about being trapped. He could stay inside the drainage tunnels the entire time and survive Yagulim's challenge. However, Hyunwoo suddenly fell to the ground concerning the others, and Kurson ran towards him asking what was wrong. He helped Hyunwoo up, and Hyunwoo explained that he was using too much blood and got lightheaded. The mosquitoes were taking more blood than he expected, so he questioned what he should do, because he wouldn't be able to hold out at this rate. He questioned if he should try finding another method. The gauntlet started glowing, meaning monsters were making their way through his traps. Hyunwoo asked Kurson to take a step back for now. He was concerned because these monsters were intelligent, unlike the ghast. He took out his sword and faced the tunnel the new monsters were making their way through. As he stared in the tunnel, the number of monster eyes continued to grow. Hyunwoo began to question how many monsters were coming. The monsters began to step into the light, and Hyunwoo became surprised because they were wearing a soldier's uniform. He lowered his guard because he thought they were humans. However, as they stepped fully in the light, Hyunwoo could see they were just zombies, and he prepared to be attacked. The commander of the zombies ordered the others to attack Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo took some spider web and wrapped it around his dagger and threw it. He knew Yagulim's challenge would be too easy if all he had to face was ghast. The dagger impaled one of the zombies in the head. Then, using the skill effect of the dagger, Hyunwoo injected the zombie with his blood. He pulled his dagger back and told the zombies to eat up. The other zombies completely forgot about Hyunwoo and began devouring their own kind. Using this opportunity, Hyunwoo began making his way to the escape, but the commander of the zombies, who was unaffected by his tactics, noticed him. It quickly snapped the others out of it, and they began chasing Hyunwoo again. Hyunwoo made his way up the drainage pipe. He didn't know what to do. If he continued running, he would run into the ghast, but he couldn't face the zombies because they had military training. He began to wonder if the zombies could be reasoned with since they were once human, but he concluded he wouldn't be able to because the zombies had seen the Yagulim's banquet hall delicacies and were already under his control. The zombies climbed up the drainage pipe and came out guns blazing. They managed to hit Hyunwoo's leg and brought him to his knees. With his leg like this, Hyunwoo didn't know what to do. He became concerned because the surrounding area was too quiet. He stood up and realized he was bleeding, and right on time the ghast arrived to have dinner. Hyunwoo was now surrounded by ghast and zombies. He had a chance of surviving in the sewers, but in the open like this he had no chance of surviving. But the good news is he only had 46 minutes until he completed Yagulim's challenge. Even though he only had to survive for 46 minutes, it was more than enough time for the ghast to kill him 100 times over. But still, he thought this wasn't the worst that could have happened. He fell below 10% health and started regenerating. The zombies charged in, but Hyunwoo couldn't back up because the ghast also charged in. He took out a crystal stone and ate it. The crystal stone completely restored his mana, allowing him to cast the domination skill. The zombies charged past Hyunwoo and began devouring the ghasts. Hyunwoo smiled menacingly. He wasn't controlling the monsters. All he did was amplify the smell of the ghast that were bitten by the mosquitoes. And now the undead were more attracted to the ghast because they are a bigger target. Hyunwoo stared at the chaos, wondering if this was the scene humans saw before dying out. It was exactly what he imagined hell to be like. Suddenly he heard a gunshot. He dodged the bullet and turned around and noticed the commander of the zombies had a few zombies who weren't under the effect of domination, and they had taken arms. Hyunwoo questioned why they were attacking him when his domination skill was still active. He measured the distance between him and the zombies and realized they were too far away for domination to work on them. The commander ordered the other goblins to fire, but before they could get a single shot off, Kurson arrived and beheaded them. After saving Hyunwoo, Kurson told him to save the thanks for later and proudly stuck his chest out like a superhero. Hyunwoo realized that Kurson thought he was in an edit. The commander was now pissed and he grabbed one of the guns to shoot, but it had been frozen by the effect of the Scythe of the Winter Gathering. Kurson attacked and defeated the commander. Hyunwoo became distracted by Kurson. In the past, if he asked Kurson for help, Kurson would have complained first. But after he gave him the scythe, he listened to him pretty well. He concluded that Kurson is a slave to materialism too. Hyunwoo had become distracted and one of the Ghast managed to sneak up on him. He dodged the attack and prepared to attack. However, the Ghast was pulled into the chaos by a zombie. Hyunwoo looked around and realized the monster's number had been doubled. He was running out of mana and wouldn't be able to maintain domination. Since it was nighttime, the mosquitoes became active again. Hyunwoo quickly covered himself with spider webs. The horde of mosquitoes fell under domination and attacked the Ghast and zombies. In a close-range battle like this, it was hard for the monsters to differentiate friend from foe. On top of that, thanks to Kurson's side, they were all frozen. He looked around the horde and noticed Kurson was gone. He concluded that he must have gotten away safely. He started getting trigger-happy because the horde of mosquito gave him the upper hand. He calmed himself down because Yagolim's challenge wasn't done. However, the good thing is his goal wasn't to kill all the monsters, but to survive for 48 hours. A zombie crawling on the floor managed to sneak up on the distracted Hyunwoo and take a chunk out of his leg. Hyunwoo killed the zombie, but he was now running low on blood. Yagolim began to observe Hyunwoo again. Hyunwoo didn't know what to do. The domination skill was about to be deactivated. If he could replenish his blood, he would be able to finish Yagolim's challenge. He decided to order some of the mosquitoes under his control to suck the blood of one of the Ghast. Then he ordered them to inject it into him. He knew what he was doing was stupid, but he was running out of options. His body was rejecting the Ghast's blood, and Hyunwoo fell to the ground. The domination skill also deactivated, and he was quickly surrounded by monsters. A Ghast took out its claws, getting ready to devour Hyunwoo. But in an instant, Hyunwoo ripped the Ghast's hand and jumped into the air. Hyunwoo had taken the form of a Ghast mixed with a human. Using his new form, Hyunwoo flipped the script and began devouring the Ghast. After devouring another Ghast, a message appeared informing him the characteristic blood of the hungry was applied to his poison blood. With this characteristic, whenever he eats the blood of the hungry, his physical abilities increase by 30%. During the time the characteristic is active, the user will suffer extreme hunger, and the food eaten previously will be absorbed within his system rapidly. However, if the user is in a state of fasting, he might die because the characteristics will begin to devour his body. The system reminded Hyunwoo that even though it sounded good for dieting, he would lose muscle in the process. Hyunwoo looked at his hand, realizing the characteristic had already begun devouring the nutrients in his body, and suddenly, without warning, he started feeling the hungry sensation. In the moment, it felt like his stomach was digesting him from the inside, and if he didn't eat anything soon, he would die. A zombie attacked Hyunwoo, but he was able to crush its head with ease. He was feeling very powerful. The stars began to watch over Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo now understood how the stars operate. They gave people a pain worse than death, making them commit slowly as they looked down from the top. He asked the stars if they liked the show he was putting on for them. Then he jumped in the air and descended on the monsters. Then he began making his way through the horde of monsters, cutting them like butter. But he got careless, and one of the Ghast managed to land a hit on him, sending him flying into the debris. The Ghast pinned Hyunwoo down and began to devour him. Not wanting to end the quest like this, Hyunwoo began eating the Ghast as they ripped into him. He came out of the monster pile regenerated and refreshed, and asked the monsters to come at him. The monsters were terrified of Hyunwoo's new form, so he jumped into the horde of monsters and began ripping them apart. A while later, all the monsters were defeated, but one zombie remained. The lone zombie regretted accepting Yagolim's invitation, although it was decided that their entire squad would come, because it's been a while since Yagolim invited them to feast. But with their large numbers, they managed to lose to Hyunwoo. He wanted to run away quickly before Hyunwoo finds and devours him. As he crawled away, he ran into a pile of corpses, and on top was a figure eating the corpse. The zombie called out to the figure, asking if it's one of his squad members. Hyunwoo, who had fallen in a state of hunger and was almost monster-like, turned to the zombie and began approaching it to kill. The zombie crawled back, begging Hyunwoo to stay away. He picked up a gun, but it couldn't shoot because Kurson's side skill was still in effect. The zombie picked up one of the Ghast arm and took out Hyunwoo's leg. But still Hyunmoo was coming at him. He lifted the gassed hand to crush Hyunwoo's head with it. But Hyunmoo managed to take its arm. With the zombie not being able to defend himself, Hyunmoo proceeded to eat him alive. He completed his quest and was rewarded with a silver box that improved to a golden box. And because this was Yagolim's challenge, the golden box turned into a present box from Yagolim himself. He had 28 days until he was assigned his next quest. A while later, the characteristic Blood of the Hungry was deactivated, and he absorbed a shard. After gaining consciousness, Hyunmoo flipped over on his back. He was feeling hungry. He looked around at the deformed corpses of monsters, questioning what happened when he was in that state. He couldn't think about it for long because the feeling of being hungry was too much for him to handle. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a trumpet and footsteps of monsters approaching him. He sat up, questioning if the fight wasn't over. Hyunmoo became concerned because every single one of the monsters he saw in front of him is a greater being, stronger than the ghast and zombies. But what caught his attention was the carriage the monsters were pulling. He questioned why monsters that strong were pulling that carriage along, and wondered what would be inside. The monsters placed the carriage down and cowered of satiety, and Sloth stepped out saying Hyunmoo enjoyed his meal without being fully prepared. From Hyunwoo's scared expression, Coward guessed he wouldn't have to introduce himself. Hyunmoo, who was nervous, knew Coward was testing him. Coward checked Hyunwoo's level, questioning how he managed to survive with such a low level, but he now understood why the stars were interested in him. He became confused because he thought humans had gone extinct, so he asked Hyunmoo if there are any other humans. Hyunmoo remained silent. Coward took his claws and scratched Hyunmoo to get a taste of his blood. He guessed that Hyunmoo was the only human, but this didn't make sense because it's almost like he fell from the sky. He thought mankind had gone extinct after two humans named John and Maria Keller died. He never would have thought there would be a human still surviving. Coward started gathering the corpses of the monsters close by. He couldn't let a precious child stay like this out in the open. Using the corpses, Coward regenerated Hyunwoo's leg and asked him to follow behind him, because a child as precious as him should be welcomed with a feast. Hyunmoo told him to wait and asked if he wanted him to become a part of Yagolim's family. He told Coward if that's the case, he had no plans of becoming a mere delicacy for him. Coward burst into laughter and told Hyunmoo he misunderstood something. He asked Hyunmoo if he knows what the simplest and most basic craving is. Hyunmoo looked confused, so he told him it's hunger. He explained that Yagolim's hunger is endless. He explained that Yagolim devours influence, discipline, sexual desire, money, and power, and uses it whenever and however he wants. He says when he was human he couldn't get anything he wanted because of morality and discipline. He says everything he wanted should have been his. They were supposed to be the fruits of his labor. Just the thought of it began to anger him. He turned to Hyunmoo saying he knows he is filled with greed and anger as well, and that he deserves what's rightfully his. His words were beginning to resonate with Hyunmoo. Coward asked Hyunmoo if he doesn't want to know what he could obtain and how high he could climb. He says that's why Hyunmoo should become a being that swallows the whole world. Coward reached forth his hand, and Yagolim spoke through him, asking Hyunmoo to become a part of him. Hyunmoo stood up saying he had no choice. Coward was expecting Hyunmoo to join them, but instead Hyunmoo bit his arm. He punched Hyunmoo, asking how dare a beast like him try to eat him. Hyunmoo told Coward he didn't understand why he tasted worse than the ghast and zombies. He asked Coward if all traitors tasted like this. This angered Coward, and in an instant he appeared in front of Hyunmoo. He no longer saw the point in talking to Hyunmoo, so he is going to kill him. Hyunmoo knew Coward couldn't kill him because there needs to be a variable in the game the stars are playing. He stood up against Coward because he knew he was that variable. He could try to establish himself somewhere else, but he couldn't let this opportunity slip by, and even if Coward killed him, it wouldn't be his first time dying. He told Coward to try and kill him. Coward picked him up by the neck, asking if he should break it, crush it, or smash it. Hyunwoo's mouth was the problem, so he decided to shut it permanently using demonic energy. Suddenly, the monstrous star Augustro began watching the situation. In an instant, Coward was sent flying by a gust of wind. He got on his knees begging the star to forgive him. He says he had no intention of breaking the rules. He just got excited because it's been a while. The star still seemed angry, so he ordered everyone to retreat. Hyunmoo stood up and shouted at the star, saying they could try anything they wanted, but he would never join them. He passed out and had a nice dream about men. When he woke up, Renane was in his face. She showed him a scar on her leg, saying she came to see Hyunmoo after everything ended, but his eyes were glowing green, and he tried to eat her. Hyunmoo questioned if all this happened after he lost consciousness. Renane told Hyunmoo not to worry because she had something to eat beforehand. Hyunmoo became curious about the reward he received from the quest and opened his inventory to check. He opened Yagolim's present box and received a platinum card. Hyunmoo looked at the card in amazement. He had never seen a card that wasn't silver or gold. The card disappeared and a blade fell on the ground. Looking at the blade, Hyunwoo became disappointed because it looked boring. He thought to himself that he shouldn't be disappointed because the blade came from a platinum card and was a gift from Yagulim. He decided he needed to look at the blade carefully. He took out the monocle and learnt the blade had a special effect. It absorbs sacrificed weapons and gains the sacrificed weapons effects. He showed Renane the blade and asked what she thought about it. Renane said the sword was good, making Hyunwoo happy because if Renane said the blade was good then it must be. He decided to sacrifice the short blade flowing with blood to the blade. He took the short blade out of his inventory and gave it to the gluttonous sword to eat. However, nothing happened. Hyunwoo sat in the corner wondering why it felt like the sword was ignoring him. He tried again and suddenly the sword split down the middle, forming a mouth, and devoured the short blade. The sword ate the short blade and gained the ability to expel blood. If Hyunwoo's allies come in contact with the expelled blood, they will begin to heal. However, if his enemies come in contact with the expelled blood, they would take damage. Hyunwoo told Renane that he liked the sword. However, Renane reminded him that he likes everything that has a high rank. Hyunwoo was happy because with the sword he could get stronger. Seeing Hyunwoo happy made Renane happy, and she says she hoped he continues to become tastier. With the rewards out of the way, Hyunwoo told Renane he needed to go somewhere, and some time later they arrived at the place where they found the skeleton. Hyunwoo apologized to the skeleton, saying, taking their items and leaving them like this weighing heavily on his mind. After gathering all of the skeleton's items, Hyunwoo went through it trying to find a way to identify the skeleton so he could make a headstone, but he couldn't find anything. The skeleton survived till the very end, so he assumed he was a ranker. Hyunwoo thought about the zombies and cowered. He wondered if he was any different from those who gave up on humanity because he was ordering monsters around. He told himself he was different from those monsters because he hadn't surrendered his sanity to greed. That's also why he thought the skeleton was impressive. While fighting in a world like this, the skeleton managed to protect others all on his own. He needed to get going, so he looked in one of the cabinets of the desk trying to find some sort of ID before he left. Inside the cabinet was a journal, so Hyunwoo took it out and started reading, hoping to find a clue about the skeleton's identity. However, the journal shocked him. He narrates that high-grade items aren't the only important thing in this world. Even a single book with information can become an item that changes the world. The journal had information about the first dungeon to the end of humanity. He quickly started making his way outside. Every event in human history has been documented in the journal. What and when things will happen and how to stop it from happening. If everything written in the journal is true, Hyunwoo now has the key that can save all of humanity. Hyunwoo thought the skeleton was amazing. He said he would make sure to put his last regrets to good use. He couldn't let such valuable information go to waste, so he will change it. He doesn't know if trying to change things would return things to normal. But no matter the outcome, his new mission is to save humanity from this hell. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video then hit the like button.